Let's greet them. Starting us off, columnist, businessman, and most recently, a fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute, Bill King. Next up, Holly Hansen, political writer for The Texan. In the 3 spot, writer and public policy consultant, Charles Blaine. And batting cleanup tonight, education and public safety advocate, Paul Castro.
With a presidential race that is being called a coin flip by some, tonight is setting up to be a very long night.
Panel, this race will be decided by 7 swing states. Bill King, I know you've been crunching the numbers, watching the trends. Where are we right now?
I think we're where everybody says we are, which is it comes down to these 7 states, which is, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. And Trump appears to be leading those last 4. Harris is leading in Wisconsin and Michigan, and so it all comes down to Pennsylvania. And that 19 electoral votes, and that is basically a toss-up. But all the polling in all 7 states is way inside the margin of error. So any one of these states could go either direction. And so you might have somebody sweep all 7 of them. Either direction is entirely possible. If Harris wins Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, she has 270 electoral votes exactly. And so she would win.
Holly, during our discussions, we've identified 3 major issues. We've seen them on the airwaves constantly. Abortion, border security, and the economy/inflation. Are those going to be the deciding issues for voters?
I think so. I think certainly the economy is going to be number 1. And a lot of people are looking at their economic situation right now and asking themselves, am I better off today than I was 4 years ago, or am I worse off? The other 2 issues could be motivating voters to the polls. Certainly a lot of women are interested in the abortion issue, but we're not seeing a huge turnout, extra turnout of women in the state of Texas, certainly. We are seeing some positive numbers for both Republicans and Democrats, depending on which part of the country you're looking at, but we've also seen a surge of voters with no voting history. So we really don't know where those people are going to fall when they're choosing that presidential candidate.
Many people have theorized, Blaine, that in the presidential race, many white wives are going in a separate direction than their husbands. Do you believe that theory when it comes to Trump?
I don't think so. I mean, I know there's been a lot of conversation about that, and there's even a push from Democrats towards the end saying, you can vote that way and not tell your husband. I don't know how much that's catching on, because I think even in some of the exit polling and the earlier polling, like we were saying with early voting, you don't see it manifesting in some of those early numbers. Just like we don't see the younger votes coming out the way that they said they would come out, increase this election. The women's vote, even some of the minority communities that we expected or had a conversation about coming out in mass, it's not materializing in the way that we expected. So I don't think it's happening that way, but there is a lot of conversation for it, and there was certainly a push for it towards the end of early voting.
Paul Castro, on the issue of border security, of paramount importance here in Texas, you theorize that the national Democratic leadership got the strategy wrong by not owning what went on in the first 3 years of the Biden administration. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I think the Democrats figured this out perhaps too late. By the time they figured it out and they did try to put something out in front of legislation, it fell apart. And so it fell apart because it was too close to the election, and Republicans didn't want to give them a win. I do think that now that they have woken up, perhaps we can get a solution post-election. I don't know about that yet. And I'm hopeful that at a minimum, people are keeping that in mind when they cast their ballots.
And Bill, for many people, they have been watching all of these polls. Do you have a lot of confidence in the pollsters out there, or you just wait until the vote comes in from the people?
First, let me go back to the question about what wives do. You should have asked somebody on the panel who's actually married.
Let's go back to that. Your thoughts on that question.
I promise you, my wife is very independent in the way she voted. And I suspect that we voted different ways. She didn't tell me, by the way, how she voted. But the polling, like, a lot of people lost confidence in the polling because in 2016 and 2020, Trump was underestimated in both of those. They, much more so in 2016 than in 2020. But that was largely because he was bringing a number of people who had been disengaged from the electorate. You know, in polling, the real trick to it is try to figure out who's going to come vote. I mean, you can ask 100 people and you know exactly what those percentages are, but you got to figure out that white guy who's a blue collar guy that doesn't have any college education, how many of those kind of guys are going to come vote? And what we saw in 2016 and 2020 is a lot of people, traditionally Democratic voters, had gotten sort of disgusted with the Democratic Party, stopped voting because they also didn't like the Republicans, and all of a sudden in Trump they saw somebody that they could get behind, and so they turned out in bigger numbers than almost any of the pollsters expected. But the pollsters say they've adjusted for that. They were closer in 2020. Look, when it's this close, I mean, way inside the margin of error, the poll is basically worthless. I mean, it doesn't really tell you anything.
All right, Holly, both of these candidates are offering a grab bag of financial benefits. Kamala Harris is talking about tax credits for children, tax credits to start a new business, tax credits to buy a home. President Trump is offering tax cuts for a whole range of people. What do you think is resonating?
Well, I think that the Harris administration has offered some pretty impressive tax increases, and that is making a lot of business owners nervous, and a lot of those who are employing people in the United States. It's making them pretty nervous when they look at that. Some of these economic policies that have been thrown out on the campaign trail this year have been a little puzzling. They seem sort of scattershot in a way. For example, Trump throwing out, we're going to exempt tips from taxes, and some of these other ideas that don't seem like they come from a well-formulated economic plan. And Harris really has not differentiated herself from Biden. She is a kind of pseudo-incumbent, and she has said that she can't think of anything that she would do differently from what Biden has done. And so when people are looking at the economic situation and not liking what they see that 2019, pre-COVID pandemic, they were doing pretty well. The economy seemed to be roaring. You can try to explain that away, and it's not necessarily directly the president, but that's what most voters think about. They think about, how was I doing when this person was the president? How am I doing now that Biden and Harris are in charge of the country?
I want you all to wrap your head around the concept of a wild card. What is the wild card in this race? The wild card that could turn it one way or the other. Anything pop to mind, Charles Blaine?
I think in some states, probably, what the Hispanic population does. I mean, the whole conversation around the Puerto Rico comment that was made at the rally gained a lot of steam, and then obviously there was pushback and back and forth over that. And there's 500,000 Puerto Ricans who live in Pennsylvania, and there's large populations in other states as well. And so I think with that ends up breaking and how that looks, and even here in Texas when it comes to the Senate race and how close that might be, or some of the congressional districts on the border and how the Hispanic vote breaks out there. So I think depending on who gets that, I think that's going to be a wild card. And similarly to if Kamala is able to get the black vote out in a robust form, the way that she's been campaigning to do so, if they do turn out like that, I think that could also be a wild card.
Paul, you got 20 seconds. Your wild card.
You stole my Hispanic
Sorry.
comment.
So, you know it better, so just say it better. Say it better.
I also think so. Hispanics are normally a late-breaking voting group. And so because this happened so late, a lot of them hadn't voted early yet. And so a lot of people who are making their decisions late in the game had that information in front of them. I do know that the Harris campaign spent a ton of money targeting Hispanic voters, especially in Pennsylvania. And a lot of the other supporting PACs spent a ton of money to contact every single person who had a Puerto Rican area code as a cell phone number, and specifically targeting them, putting that clip on their phones the morning after, and giving them something to think about.
All right. Stick with us. Our election night coverage will continue after the break.
Fox 26. 26 YouTube page. Like and subscribe today.
And welcome back. The race for the White House may be at the top of most people's minds.
But we have several more local issues on the ballot, including the race to represent Texas in the Senate between incumbent Ted Cruz and challenger Colin Allred. Let's go live to our Tom Ziska, who's in Dallas at Allred's party. Tom.
Greg and Isaiah, good evening to you. We are at the Longhorn Ballroom here. It's a storied venue here in Dallas. Doors just opened for Colin Allred supporters to come in. Not a lot of them just yet, as the polls just closed in Texas, as you well know. It has been an 18-month campaign for Colin Allred. 18 months since he said, I'm going to challenge Ted Cruz and try to become the first senator from Texas since Lloyd Benson in 1988. 36 years since a Texas senator. So that's a notable thing here. Of course, you know the polls, they're very, very close. They are leaning toward Ted Cruz, but statistically within the margin of error, it's a real dead heat. So that's why today, we saw earlier, we have some video of it, Colin Allred going to a call center where calls were being made, get out and vote, and then there was a get out the vote block walk where they were going to go knock on doors and say, hey, have you voted? If not, let me show you the way. As part of that, the congressman who represents a district here in the Dallas area said the time for talk now is pretty much over, and it is in voters' hands. Here's what he had to say.
And every Texan has to know that their voice matters. Every vote will matter. It doesn't matter where you are in our state. It doesn't matter if you have a competitive local race. This race will be, and we need your vote. We need your voice. This is not one that you wouldn't sit out. You wouldn't let somebody pick your Netflix playlist for the next 6 years. Don't let them pick your senator.
It's kind of a cheeky way to put that, and I don't know that I want anybody choosing what I watch on Netflix for the next 6 years. I can barely choose on a day-to-day basis, but that's a different matter altogether. So the votes are just now trickling in. So much to count throughout the state of Texas, so much at stake, and the winner could well decide control of the Senate. So that's what we are watching here in Dallas. Meantime, in Houston, they are watching at Ted Cruz's campaign where Sherman DeSalle is. Sherman?
Yeah, good evening, Tom. A lot of people just trickling in at this location, Marriott Marquis in downtown Houston. And so as voters are coming in, there's definitely some excitement from a lot of their supporters, donning the red, donning the Cruz posters, just getting acquainted with the space, getting together with fellow supporters. And like you mentioned, there is definitely a lot at stake here because there's something to note. Democrats, they control the state's big cities like Houston, but they've been shut out of power for quite a bit statewide. And of course, at the Capitol, the GOP holds the commanding majorities, which is why this race is important for Senator Ted Cruz, the incumbent who wants to stay in for yet another 6-year term. His motto has been keep Texas in an effort to keep the conservative vote strong, the conservative values strong, that align with the presidential candidate, former President Donald Trump, who's also watching this race closely tonight. So a lot is at stake, like you mentioned. Every vote counts, especially for a person like Cruz, who, if you remember, in his last campaign, in his last race, narrowly won that re-election against Beto O'Rourke. So this is definitely the race to watch, not just in Texas, but across the country. Whoever wins this determines a lot of what's happening in the state, in the country's capital. So we send it back to you at the studio. We'll try to hear from some supporters as they come in, get a little bit of how they're feeling tonight as these numbers are trickling in. Back to you.
Yeah, appreciate that, Sherman. I want to go to you, Paul Castro. Our good friend Mark Jones at Rice University says any Democrat who wants to win statewide has to capture at least 60%, maybe 66% of the Latino vote. What I've seen is that Allred may fall short of that. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, so what it looks like so far is that the campaign and the messaging from his campaign hasn't necessarily resonated with voters, especially Hispanic voters. Hispanic voters are really interested in two top things, and that's the economy and inflation. and the messaging has been more on social issues. Because it's been more on social issues, especially when it comes to abortion, my thought, if I were on the Allred campaign, is this going to land with and get me votes from the Hispanic community? So far, it does not look like that's happening.
And of course, when we look at these two candidates, both have spent about $80 million each as of November 4th. Has that worked, Blaine?
I mean, I think so, and they're saying that it's the most expensive Senate race in the country, and I think you can see that in the back-to-back-to-back ads that keep playing, and especially towards the end when Cruz started running very heavy ads attacking Colin Allred on his stance on transgender, or on boys and girls sports, and that really started to stick. I mean, it was just wall-to-wall coverage of that, and then you started to see some Democrats come out and start to criticize him publicly, and I think that message really sunk in, and in large part because of the funding and because of what he used with how he used that funding to drill that message in.
Holly, you've covered that issue particularly well and in depth. You know they did a ton of testing with audiences. They spent a ton of money talking about the transgender issue. Do you think it's resonating, particularly in the suburbs? You know, suburban women, they're the king makers and queen makers.
Very much so, and I'm still upset with Isaiah for not giving me the question about wives.
It was the line. It was the line. I should have came back.
No, but you know, that issue has resonated, and it has cross-party appeal because it's just common sense. People are worried about these biological males who want to be females competing with girls in the sports. It's been proven to be dangerous. There was a young woman in another part of the country who actually has brain damage from playing volleyball with one of these biological males. So people look at this and they just see it as a common sense issue. And the problem for Colin Allred is that he did vote for that transgender Bill of Rights bill, or he was co-sponsor of it, and he also voted against a measure that would have protected girls' sports. This is not a conservative Republican issue when you have people like Martina Navratilova and J.K. Rowling, who are certainly not on the right, saying this is wrong. We need to draw the line, and we need to protect women's sports. Women's fought for decades to have their own sphere to compete in, and so this just is disrespectful to them. I do think it resonates, and I do think it draws in some independent and moderate voters to the Republican side of the ticket.
Bill King, I was going to ask you about the oil and gas issue, but I know you've looked at the early vote, and what we're seeing are, once again, younger voters aren't turning out in particularly large numbers. African American vote was pretty flat compared to 2020. And it's the same number of women showing up in terms of a percentage as showed up in 2020. What does that tell you?
So I think the news in Texas, at least, is going to be not much changed. You know, I saw, the last time I saw in Derek Ryan's report, I think people over 70 were casting like 21% of the ballots being cast. Over 70, over 65, over 70. And that was twice as much as the people under 30 were voting. You know, I've seen this year after year, election after election. People talk about the young people are going to come out and make a big difference. It never happens. And it doesn't happen for a very simple demographic reason, which is that most people don't get very interested in voting in elections until they own a home. Once they own a home, then all of a sudden they start worrying about property taxes. Is the garbage going to be picked up on time? Do my kids have a decent school to go to? And that's all of a sudden when they get civically involved. And that's why you see such low turnout. And I don't care what any campaign does. That's not likely to change. Now, in this race, we all were sitting around wondering, is the abortion issue, repeal Roe versus Wade, the strict Texas abortion ban, is that going to motivate a bunch of young women to come out and vote? Nationally, it kind of looks like it might have, but in Texas, it doesn't really seem to have made much difference.
Can I just comment on it? So I agree with Bill on the young people, but I do think that particularly in this election, young men in large part are going to make a difference if they start coming out. I mean, if they come out the way that we've been expecting, which is part of Trump's plan that he's been doing with the podcast circuit and things like that, attracting those younger male voters who have been demonized by the Democratic Party in recent years and have really seen themselves distanced from it as they've entered this era of seeing more politics. And so while I agree young people don't vote, I do think that young men in this election could make an impact, particularly for Trump.
And of course, when we talk about Ted Cruz, many people thought he would be vulnerable as a result of the abortion issue. But is it that he wasn't vulnerable, or people in Texas will simply vote Republican, in your opinion?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking that for the most part, people are going in and voting for the person that they normally vote for. I do think there are a couple of considerations that need to be taken into account. One is just because historically voting women who historically vote for Republicans went to the polling place doesn't necessarily mean that they're pulling the lever for Cruz. So that very much could shift. And if that shifts, that is going to more than make up for the Hispanic shift. So Hispanic numbers seem to be kind of even, if not a little bit depressed. If their numbers are, towards Cruz, but white women and college-educated women are voting in higher numbers and voting for Allred, that could very well be the thing that people aren't paying attention to yet and won't see necessarily until results come in.
All right, well, stick with us. Our election night coverage will continue after this break.
Fox 26 is YouTube page. Like and subscribe today.
Well, there's a long list of races people are paying close attention to in Harris County. Let's take a look.
There's a race for the Harris County District Attorney, Democrat Sean Tier versus Republican Dan Simons.
And the Harris County Sheriff's race, incumbent Ed Gonzalez versus Republican Mike Knox.
And of course, we have Fort Bend County, Precinct 3 County Commissioner incumbent Andy Myers against Democrat Terrell Patel.
All right, let's talk about Harris County. Republicans have spent very little money here. They looked as if they overperformed to some degree in the early vote. The focus has been on the judicial races and the appeals court races. Holly, what do you see happening here?
Well, we did see a lot of money being infused into those appeals court races and those down-ballot local judicial court races. We saw Elon Musk donate $2 million to the effort to get Republican judges elected. And the issues run the gamut here. There are some issues regarding the way judges are handling criminal cases, especially how they're handling bonds and the appeals. We've also seen some complaints that the appeals courts are very, very slow. We had our 14th Court of Appeals here in the services, Houston and Harris County. Last year, one of the higher courts sent down a decision to them and just lambasted them for taking 5 years to respond to an appeal in one particular case. So people are very frustrated with these courts. There is some impetus for some change there, and we do see some crossover votes in that. Some of the PACs have raised I think at least $9 million, a little over $9 million to put into these judicial races. And we're talking about some of the crimes that are committed by people who have been released on bond, who have been in and out of jail, in and out of the courts, and are still waiting for their trials.
Paul Castro, as a public safety advocate, what does it say if these judges who have caught lots of hell for releasing repeat violent offenders are reelected?
Yeah, it was disappointing the last round. There were some specific people that I targeted along with some others to try to reduce the, try to knock those people out, and it didn't happen. I've had the unfortunate opportunity to be in courts this past, couple of years, and to see some of the shenanigans that are allowed by some judges who are allowing defense attorneys to get away with a lot of objections that then disallow evidence from coming into consideration by the jury, and that then affects the outcome of the case. This has been happening over and over again. And then on top of that, of course, the obvious things such as violent offenders being let on bail and those people going out and committing further crimes. We've made some gains, but those gains need to also, again, trickle down into the ballot box and take effect where some of these very efficient judges who were appointed by the governor went into the courtroom, cleared their dockets, and then get knocked out by people who then sit on cases. And the public needs to wake up that this is important.
And Bill, let's turn our attention to the Harris County District Attorney's Office. Sean Tier there. Is it his election to lose? Many people were shocked that Kim Ogg was booted out. Now it's his turn to face a Republican candidate here. Your thoughts on that?
So I think all of these races are going to basically go the same way. Mm-hmm. It looks like turnout is going to be almost identical to what it was in 2020. In 2020, we had a lot more people early vote, but that was a pandemic. We had more people, it looks like, voted on election day today, but when you add all that up, it balances out to about the same. And in 2020, the Republicans were winning sort of the generic Harris County ballot by about 8 to 10 points. That's what Mark Jones found in his polling was happening this time as well. I think the question is, are any of these, did this crime issue sink through any of the partisan noise? What we don't know, and what's interesting about Harris County is, we have the largest percentage in the state of people that have either never voted in a primary, this is their first time to vote, or they voted in each primary during their voting history. We only had about 46% of the people that were only Republican or only Democratic voters, and they were only about 2 points apart.
All right, stick with us. Our election night coverage will continue after this short break.
Fox 26 is your 6 YouTube page. Like and subscribe today.
Welcome back. For both presidential candidates, as long as people are casting ballots, there's still work to do.
Fox's Connor Hansen is in Washington with how the Harris campaign is getting the word out tonight.
Craig and Isaiah, this event has started here at Howard University. The president of the university just took the podium to speak, and it is completely full crowd here out in the quad of the campus and in the stands, mostly students of Vice President Kamala Harris's alma mater.
We, the people, have the power to shape our future.
Coming off a whirlwind day of energizing voters in battleground Pennsylvania, Vice President Kamala Harris is not holding any campaign events today, instead opting to do radio interviews, hoping to win over any more undecided voters.
We are tied. Every vote matters, and so I am working hard all day long, continuously, to get out the vote. There are two choices in this race, and it's about the direction of our country, whether we want to go backward or forward.
Harris wants to be the first vice president in 32 years to be promoted to the Oval Office.
I will work on your behalf as President of the United States to lift you up around dealing with, for example, the cost of living, bringing down the cost of groceries, the cost of housing.
As part of that effort, her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, making a final pitch to voters in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
This will be won by 1 or 2 votes per precinct in places like Pennsylvania. This is a time when there's a privilege to live in this country and a responsibility. Get out and vote.
Can you can talk to Houston now. I mean, you can talk to raise culture among us. We are standing.
And of course, now we're going to check back in here in Harris County with our election official here, Tanisha Husbett, who has an update on the voting process.
Here
Let's
in
go
this
there.
county and with my operation has been productive. It has been a partnership with the state of Texas and has been since September 1st since I took over elections operations. So as a matter of fact, it's been helpful and it's been supportive. So I want to set context to that there's been no distractions. As a matter of fact, it's helped us to be more efficient along the way. So we've welcomed in all certified observers that should be here by state law. And today has been a really good day. I do not, because they're not just here at election headquarters. They could be at polling locations as we speak. And again, those observers just didn't come today. Those individuals are chief election officials who are here to support our operations. And I appreciate them being here as well. And there are some that are in the field as we speak. Yes, in regards to paper, this was a much smoother election with paper. Last fall, we did a software upgrade with Hart, our voting vendor, to reduce the paper size and columns. And this election, although the average voter had anywhere from 50 to 70 contests on their ballot, the print vote record was on an 8.5 by 11 one-page sheet. That was about 99.9% of the county. So in terms of efficiency, being able to vote your ballot, scan it in, I am happy to say we had more than enough paper at every polling location. No one ran out of paper, and that there was efficiency. There was no paper jams and confusion in regards to that. And so all voters were able to vote during early voting and election day. And so that did impact such a long ballot by minimizing the columns in the print vote record. So that's a great success, but it took our team and many counterparts and stakeholders to get us to this point. Yeah, so ongoing in terms of preparation, what voters and what the county should know is it takes on average about a year for our county to prepare for presidential. So while we were running last November, we were preparing for this November. And in terms of allocations and making sure that we had enough equipment and supplies, well, one of the first things we did was we went to Commissioner's Court to get the support to order additional equipment before this November election. And we were able to bring in more equipment to make sure that we had what we need and a surplus, and for future elections, including supplies. So we started allocating what we believed the need would be based on statistical data, previous presidential elections, and then we allocated an amount over that just to be prepared, because you never know what the turnout's going to be. We can have an idea, we can compare it to previous elections. And so what you've seen is that we were able to cover those bases in a short period of time, along with moving into a new facility. So that means my team has not had a whole lot of rest, and neither have I. So if you've seen an election worker or you see some of these team members walking by, just know that this is not a job that I've done all by myself. I have an amazing team of folks who've sacrificed time from their family and friends to devote to this operation. And we all should be very grateful that this doesn't happen with a magic wand, that it is literally a really big village of folks in this county that support it. Our universal services team on the tech side, our law enforcement teams, our commissioners. It's a big operation. And all those folks has helped us to be successful leading up to today.
Can you, in the interest of transparency, letting everybody out there know, what are the election judges? What will they be doing now that the polls are closed? Physically, what will they be doing with the votes that they collected at each one of their polling sites?
Absolutely. So once they voted all voters and no voters are in line, the first thing those election judges will start to do is their paperwork. And mandated by state law, there's quite a bit of paperwork these individuals have to wrap up for the day. Any documentation that they've worked that day. Then they'll begin to close down their election day boxes. This is in a minimal amount of items. Following that shutdown, that election worker, typically with an AJ or one person of the opposite party, will then go to a rally site, which is our reporting site. And that will be the closest location to where they're at in the county. So 700 locations, 6 rally sites, and all those items take time to do. Now, one thing I imagine they're doing is they're thanking goodness that it's past 7 o'clock and the day has come to an end, and they're able to start closing out their records, but that takes time.
Did they transport the paper proof of each vote to those centers that we're talking about? There's 6 or 7 centers.
Not the actual physical paper. They do bring in what is called ballot bags, which are secure bags that are locked and sealed, and that is brought into every rally site. When those individuals come to the rally site, there's a chain of custody that takes place for us to verify their paperwork and what they're bringing into us beforehand.
Any idea, do you think we'll have all the votes counted by morning, by 6 a.m.?
I don't ever give a time on when I think they're going to be in. I do believe we'll have a good amount of the counties reporting in by that time. We should have a good percentage of election day results in, but I won't guarantee you 6 a.m. Thankfully, no. We didn't experience any further power outages. The rain and the weather kind of cleared up mid-morning. We had a handful of locations that lost power. Our machines are battery backed up, so all voters were able to continue to vote, and the power clicked on pretty quickly. I also have had a counterpart that I've been speaking with regularly at Centerpoint, and they're part of our emergency management. So I'm happy to say that there were no long litany of power outages on today, and it did not continue throughout the day. We actually got pretty lucky. Probably about 20 minutes ago, before I started this press conference, it was 500, but I don't know that to be true at this point. It might have reduced. 316,000, but I can assure you there's been more since that time. That was as of 7 p.m. 316,000 had cast their election day ballots as of 7 p.m., but that number has definitely changed since then, and we'll also give you an update on how many vote centers are still voting voters. Are there any other questions? Okay, If you give us a little bit of time, we'll give you some updated numbers on what looks like they're coming now.
That's how many vote centers are open, closed, and then up here you have the numbers for today.
Here.
No, right. Election day. Election day. That's the number.
Okay.
318.
Okay. So the updated cast ballots based on those that are still casting their ballots is 318,811. 318,811. That's all happening in real time. So we've gone from 316,000 to 318,000. And there are still there are still 497 vote centers still voting voters. 497 vote centers still voting voters. So that's more than half. That means a lot of people in line still by 7 p.m. to cast their ballot. I wish I could tell you when the next briefing will be, but I think we're looking at around the 9 o'clock hour or so. Typically, it takes those judges a little bit of time. Even those who didn't have lines by 7 p.m., they can start doing their paperwork and getting in. The good thing about it is, like I said, we do have a rally site here. So some of those judges will start reporting here, and we'll be able, I would say somewhere around the 9:30 hour, but we'll come back and let you know. All right. Thank you all so very much.
Welcome back. Bill, we heard some pretty serious numbers there. 318,000 day of votes. What does that mean?
So we also have early votes reported now. So we have 1.1 million votes that have been reported. If 319 holds, even if it gets up a little bit from these people standing in line, we're probably going to be 100,000 votes down from 2020, which is really significant. And what it appears to be doing is making the partisan difference much closer. And all the judges' races and the DA's race and all those countywide races right now, there's about a point between the Democrats and the Republicans. And you know, the polling was showing like an 8 to 10 point difference in these races. You know, when we looked at the early vote in Harris County, Democrats were only outperforming Republicans by a couple of points. This is primary history voters. We had 54% of the people that did not have a primary history. They either didn't vote in the primaries or they were first-time voters. And we had no idea what those people were going to do. But it looks like they're making this a lot closer race.
I got to get this in real quick because you and Charles Blaine co-authored an op-ed in support of Tanisha Hudspeth. Here in this county where 1 out of 4 voters doesn't have a lot of trust in the system, she's rebuilding it. You agree, Charles?
Yeah, very successfully. And if you still don't have trust, I don't know when you're going to get it. I mean, we're getting earlier results. We're having far fewer issues than we've had in the past. I mean, there were some reports of issues at polls. A lot of it was dealing with different poll workers more than anything, not so much the actual production of the election, the way that she's done it. And you know, what are the complaints? I haven't heard any complaints. She's received credit from both Democrats and Republicans. Senator Betancourt was, you know, singing her praises at a press conference this past week. And so I think she's really showing what the elected county clerk should be doing and why we should not have, you know, it went a different direction when we went with an elections administrator. And voters should remember who did that. It was our commissioner's court. They forced us to do that and then look at the 3 preceding years and then look at what we have now.
Look, if we don't give Paul Betancourt credit for taking it away from the commissioner's court and giving it back to the elected county clerk, he will never let me live it down.
He's going to be calling all
of us. Absolutely.
Holly, what's your assessment of this situation? Back in 2023, there was an audit saying not enough paper. She's like, I have paper now. We have the paper we need. So your assessment of the process here in Harris County?
I think it's improved dramatically. So I covered the 2022 elections here in Harris County, which were absolutely fraught. It was a very chaotic situation. You had lawsuits going back and forth on election day. You had a civil rights group suing because they said that voters were being disenfranchised. You had the, you know, conflicting court orders about whether or not the polls could remain open. People didn't know if their polls were open, and a lot of locations ran out of ballot paper. the situation was so fraught that in fact we do have one contest that has been declared null and void, and we're going to have a new election for one of our criminal court judges here in Harris County, although that judge has been sitting on the bench all this time. You know, we did see the audit where they talked about, you know, the shortage of ballot paper and just huge inefficiencies within the elections department under that appointed administrator. Thanks again to Paul
Tallies were
Bencourt.
late. They didn't balance. I mean, we had a lot of
Yes,
problems.
there were paperwork conflicts that they couldn't resolve. They couldn't reconcile the numbers. Lot of concerns. So, you know, it's kind of understandable that people were thinking that their vote may or may not count in Harris County. But I think Hudspeth has done a fantastic job. She's earned the trust of both the Republicans and the Democrats in Harris County. And as Charles said, there's a few glitches. There's always going to be some glitches. There's never going to be a perfect election. But by and large, she's done a very good job and has been very responsive when anyone has reported any kind of problem.
Paul, the judicial candidates got to be feeling at least some hope on the R side.
Yeah, definitely. I think something that we haven't talked about yet is this morning, at the time that polls opened, it was storming like crazy, right? So we had this terrible rainstorm that started about 6 in the morning, lasted till about 9 in the morning. And there were some people who probably would have been late voters who may have come in and tipped the scale one way or another, who didn't make it to the polls, right? And they decided, like, oh, I'm not going to go to the polls now. It's too late. I'm surprised by, you know, 1 million votes in, and the Republicans are leading, and quite a few of those district court judges in the Court of Appeals. Who knows what happens? That was not expected, and looking at the DA's race, that's a lot closer than I thought it would be.
Jump in there, Charles.
Yeah, I just want to add something. I think it's Bill mentioned this before about how much that crime message is resonating, and I think when you think about it as a whole, they've been beating this crime message into voters for about 6 years now. And then last election cycle, 4 district court judges, Republican judges won, and so now we might be seeing more if these numbers hold. And so it does seem that that message is actually resonating. And if you recall in the Democratic primary, some of those incumbent Democrat judges lost to challengers too. So maybe it is actually starting to resonate, and people are starting to feel it on both sides.
And let me say this. So in a presidential election, the Democrats have a much greater advantage in Harris County than in a gubernatorial election. So even if these Democratic judges hold on, Katie bar the door 2 years from now in 26, and it's not a presidential election, the turnout falls by about a third, and Republicans are better at turning out. So you could see a lot of Democratic judges get beat in 26.
Holly, close us out.
Well, I'd also like to note that those appeals court judges who are running are actually running in a 10-county region. And so right now, the numbers we're looking at show a few of them ahead in Harris County and a few of them just a point behind, which bodes very well for these Republicans to sweep these
They would win
courts.
those races, yeah.
And look, Mike Knox and Dan Simons could barely get up on the air. And they're making it this close. Paul?
Yeah, I think that this is one of those examples where the overall message is carrying and people are paying attention. You know, my friend Amy Castillo has been on the airwaves over and over again campaigning on behalf of Republican judges, and I think that that's carrying through with other elections that people are associating with the law.
All right, guys, stick with us on our election night coverage. We will continue after this break.
Fox 26 is 36 YouTube page. Like and subscribe today.
And welcome back to our election night coverage.
Let's now talk about Fort Bend Precinct 3 County Commissioner incumbent Andy Myers against Democrat Taral Patel. Wow, this is a very controversial race. You know, Taral Patel has been indicted for impersonating racists online to drive up sympathy for his campaign because he put himself in there as the target. Holly Hansen, you've been following this. What do you make of that?
It's just an incredible story. So Taral Patel is facing 4 misdemeanors and 5 felonies, or it's the other way around. I don't remember now at this point, but he's in big trouble. And he has been indicted. He's going to, have to face a court over these charges. It's interesting because Fort Bend County Commissioner's Court tried to redistrict and make it a little more difficult for Andy Myers to win re-election. They thought Taral Patel would just be a shoo-in, but this scandal has just overwhelmed him. And it's also touching the county judge, who's not actually on the ballot this year, but KP George could be facing charges as well. He has already been indicted on a misdemeanor count.
I'm going to make a call to put those numbers up again. What does this race look like after the early vote?
It's looking pretty incredibly much going in favor of Andy Myers.
But are you surprised at those numbers that he still has that amount of support?
It is a little bit of a surprise, right? So for viewers who don't know, he actually made these false accounts. He stole the photograph of a Fort Bend County resident to use as a fake Facebook account, and he posted these very racist messages about the Indian American community in Fort Bend County and tried to attribute those to Andy Myers and his supporters. Well, of course, it all blew up in his face. The Texas Rangers got involved. The DA's office, credit to the Fort Bend County District Attorney, who is also a Democrat, but who was willing to go where the evidence led and bring down these indictments.
And Blaine, are you surprised that he hasn't dropped out of this race, that he's continued on anyway, remaining on the ballot?
Yeah, no, I definitely am. I mean, I'm surprised he got 25,000 people to vote for him. That's remarkable in and of itself. Because those they are allegations, but they seem to be true, and they were spread far and wide. And I think everyone is pretty familiar with them. And from my understanding, there's even signs with the mugshot in Fort Bend County. And so I think people are familiar with them. So them to still vote for him, but for him to still be in this race, because this started about a year ago, and he still had time to get out. And he started to get exposed by citizens before it blew up to what it is now. And so he had to be aware that this would get bigger and it was going to become a major story. And for him to stay in, I just find it remarkable. I mean, the hubris, I guess.
Yeah, law enforcement threw a pretty narrow net here and ended up entangling Fort Bend County Judge KP George. Paul, I remember you called for his resignation. I mean, what do you make of this whole scandal and the fact that people are willing to kick it under the rug, cast their ballot for these 2, I guess, defendants, and continue on as if nothing happened?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm embarrassed on his behalf. You know, when you watch a movie and a character gets in some big trouble and you just kind of blush on their behalf. Looking at this, he should have dropped out if he had, dignity. But instead, he has hubris, and the hubris has led him to stay in the race. I think this also demonstrates to us that there's a floor, right? There are people who are just going to vote for the letter at the end of the candidate's name, D. And if that floor is 40% in Fort Bend, at least you know that. And if you're a Republican, you can run against that and understand that there are certain people you just aren't going to move. That's okay. And there are gettable people, and that I think that number is actually not bad.
And Holly, let's stay with that same line of questioning. There's a huge Indian community in Fort Bend County. Could people just be voting for Patel?
That could very well be. It is rather surprising that this number of people are still supporting Patel in light of everything that has happened. I mean, I read through these search warrants, and if you look through the evidence here and you look through the messages, his communications with KP George, I mean, this seems to have all been very well orchestrated with the county judge. Yes, I think Paul made a great point there, saying this does show you what the floor is, that people will vote for the Democrat in Fort Bend County, at least 41% of them, no matter what, even if their candidate has been indicted. Yeah, that's a little bit disturbing, but that's the nature of politics in the United States today.
And really quick, Greg, my last question to Blaine. Is it offensive that someone has used racism in this way when it wasn't real?
Certainly, because it diminishes real instances of racism, and there are plenty, and people bring those up. And so when you have these kind of conversations, what it does is it gets people kind of worked up, and when they do see real instances, they don't want to believe them. And so it is frustrating. His own community should be frustrated by it, but so should others, because this happens far too often.
All right, thank you, sir. Now let's turn to the balance of power in Congress.
For that, we go to our Lena DeFlorius in the newsroom. Lena, talk to us.
You got it, and we have a lot to talk about. Right now, you're taking a look at some of the propositions and the results. Proposition A from flood control, and that looks like it's going to be passing at this moment. But if you wanted to take a look at the map here, so I want to just let you know that 16 states have been called, and some of them are still leaning individually. But I wanted to take a look at our local races here. So the Texas Senate seat, obviously, you were talking about that. Cruz is in the lead right now. And in the House of Representatives, the districts here that have already been called, District 2 called for Crenshaw, District 7 called for Fletcher, and 18 called for Turner. But you want to take a look at the balance of power. The Senate is the larger chamber. So I want to walk you through 100 seats in the Senate. Texas has 2 because every state gets 2. Doesn't matter the size of the state, the population of the state, and these are 6-year terms and they're staggered. That's why you're only seeing Ted Cruz's seat on the ballot. And there are only 34 seats that are up for election this time around. And the balance of power, what that looks like for us here in Texas is 2 seats. You have Ted Cruz's seat and John Cornyn. But because John Cornyn is not on the ballot this time, we're only watching Ted Cruz's seat. Now, of the 100, 51 is needed for control. Currently, Democrats have that. Republicans are looking to pick up 1 or 2 seats to balance or control. And then you want to take a look at the next chamber as well. So again, the Senate there. Now, House of Representatives, much larger chamber. There are 435 seats in the House. This one is based on population. Texas has 38 congressional districts and 38 representatives. This is the first time. Before the 2020 census, Texas had 36, again based on population, and these are 2-year terms. And all 435 people who are in the House, they are running. They run every 2 years. So 535 seats, 218 for control in the House. Currently, Republicans have that, and it looks like they're leading right now. If you're wondering what the representation looks like in the state of Texas, it looks something like this, basically 2-1 favored for Republicans. So for every Democrat that Texas has sent to the House for this session, there are 2 Republicans that have been sent to represent the state as well. Guys, back to you.
U.S. House races we are watching, District 18.
And of course, that is a seat once held by the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. And there is a move to fill her unexpired term, and that's by her daughter, Erica Lee. And of course, to continue on in January would be former Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner.
All right, Sylvester Turner is going to finish his political career in the U.S. Congress, Bill. Charles Blaine, moving
on.
Look.
I don't know why he would want to do this. I mean, to go up with his experience and his age and go as a freshman congressman, I mean, you're absolutely low man on the totem pole. I didn't understand why he did it, and he's not been very healthy, but I wish him well.
Sylvester Turner was not selected by the voters. He is tonight, but during the primary, there was no primary process. He was selected by precinct chairs. Charles Blaine, do you find that in any way undemocratic?
I mean, listen, unfortunately that's the way it's spelled out in law, but I don't think that should be how it's done. Similarly to how Kamala Harris became the nominee of her party, I think it should have to go back to voters. Voters have the ultimate say, but that's how it's written, and so that's how it's going to be. But I thought it was interesting that it wasn't a shoe-in from the start. I mean, he did have opponents, prominent ones, Councilmember Letitia Plummer, Amanda Edwards, people who typically would back out and let the elder statesmen just take that, as we saw in the mayor's race when Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee got in, but it wasn't the same this time around. And so I'm curious if he chooses to run again, officially run again, if he's going to see challengers like that and how much of a fight they're going to put up.
And of course, we have Erica Lee, her daughter, running for the unexpired term. Do you foresee any problems with that, Paul, in her getting that?
Well, I know Erica, and I have a great deal of respect for her. I think that it's going to be important for her to make a decision. This is going to be a big political decision, whether she wants to primary, Mayor Turner or not. And I think she will. And if she does, I wish her luck.
Holly, thoughts on this race?
Not a lot. I'm kind of with Bill on this. There's not a lot to say. I mean, it's long been held by Sheila Jackson Lee. I forget, how many decades she held that seat. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of changes in the representation that district is selecting. It's going to be a safe Democrat seat for a long time to come.
Charles, one of the criticisms has been that by stepping in as something of an elder statesman with only 1 or 2 terms to serve, that Mayor Turner is denying the district the kind of seniority building that is necessary to really have stroke in Congress.
I think that's right. I mean, you want to give someone an opportunity. If you want someone who's going to be like Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and spend decades there, you want to give them the opportunity sooner rather than later. His argument was that the district needed someone stable to be a bridge, and I don't know exactly what that means. I mean, I think the district would have survived just well with one of them if they were committed to it the way that they seem to be. So we'll see. I mean, he did say he was going to serve, I think it was 2 terms, or I think that might be what he said, but it was certainly, he put a cap on it. And we'll see if he adheres to that. A lot of people say that, and then they get there and change their mind.
Bill, many people were devastated when we lost Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, whether you agreed with her or not. Many people called her a workhorse. Are we talking about big shoes to fill that can be filled by someone, even if it's former Mayor Sylvester Turner?
I don't know anybody that's ever going to be able to work as hard as Sheila did. I've known her. I knew her, Mickey Leland, way back in the 80s. And she was just, she was a force of nature when it came to campaigning, whether you agree with her or not. I mean, she was out there all the time, talking to constituents, going to all kinds of events. I mean, she was out in the community, listening to people. She was a great retail politician. Again, whether you agree with her views or not, she was very successful. And I guess was only the 3rd person to hold that seat. I think it was Barbara Jordan, then
Mickey
Leland, and then Craig, I guess, had it, and then so she was the 4th, yeah.
And of course, just a brief story about Sheila Jackson Lee when she was Congresswoman, and we were all trapped in our homes for COVID. And there's a small community right across 45 from the Woodlands called Tamina. Freedmanstown, all black people, about 500 families there. And they couldn't get anyone to come in and give them COVID tests. So I called Sheila Jackson Lee, and she says, Isaiah, that's not my district, you'll get me in trouble. But she decided to bring those people COVID tests anyway. And then she brought them the vaccine afterwards. So she worked hard, not just in her district, but around this country and around this community.
All right, icon. Stick with us. Our election night coverage will continue after the short break.
Fox 26 is 36 YouTube page. Like and subscribe today.
And welcome back to our election night coverage. Now to the HISD bond, Proposal 1, Proposal A actually, $4 billion for new school buildings and renovation and expansion of existing school buildings.
And this Proposition B, a $440 million bond in HISD for technology, equipment, and systems technology, infrastructure, instruction, and a bunch of stuff like that. I don't know. Okay, well, how's that doing? I mean, we have some graphics to show up here.
Let's put the numbers back up there. What's the latest?
Based upon what we're hearing, the bonds are going down 40, 60. Bill, you've taken a look at the numbers, right? Yep, there they are.
Yeah, this may be historic. It's very difficult to beat a school bond in Texas. They pass 95% of the time. I've never seen margins like this before where they're going down, 60-40. That'll probably get worse as the night goes on, I would guess, based on who's voting on Election Day. By the way, the Harris County flood tax is barely ahead right now.
All right, Paul Castro, you are an educator. You understand what's going on in HISD. Is this a major blow, and what has gone wrong? What needs to be done rapidly in order to address what are clearly crumbling infrastructure issues?
Yeah, I believe it's unfortunate. Obviously, a great majority of the area believes otherwise. My primary concern is what people have done is they've conflated what happened in terms of the district takeover by the state with what's needed in terms of infrastructure upgrades and safety upgrades for the schools. And if there's a thought that this is going to somehow send a message to Austin, I don't think it's going to work the way that people think it will work. I do think that this administration needs to come back and put something together, probably a smaller package, but I also think that's not going to address the issues that they identified in the first bond. They actually identified far more than $4.4 billion. They identified something closer to $8 billion in needs. They trimmed that back. When that will happen, who knows? Some people are saying it could happen as early as the spring. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is going to be something that's going to set them back and create a longer term need. Things are only going to continue to deteriorate. The buildings aren't going to get better with time. And who knows, this might be something that gets set back 2 or 3 years.
And have we seen any money used against this proposal? Are people saying this is Mike Miles? Say no to this. This is the TEA coming into Houston, changing your school district, Holly.
Well, I don't know that they had to spend a lot of money to defeat this bond. There was a pretty much bipartisan opposition to it. So you had Republicans opposed to it based on fiscal responsibility issues. You had Democrats opposed to it because they're opposed to the state takeover. The really sad thing is that this district has had problems for such a long time, and a lot of these schools were neglected.
To get through the
maintenance was not kept on them. Some of the schools have mold in them. The air conditioning units are not working properly. And at the end of the day, we're still talking about children that are attending school in these buildings. And prior to the state takeover, we had some schools that had not met the minimum standards for a decade. And so it's sort of ironic that some of the people who are in opposition to the bond are angry because they've got this state-appointed board in place, but they weren't angry about the problems before the state took over.
Let's turn to the flood bonds, which are in what I like to call Donnybrook. It's really close. We'll get those numbers in just a second. Bill, it's really close right now, correct?
Yeah, it's 2 or 3 points. It's the flood tax. This isn't new bonds. This is a huge increase in your taxes. And I guess that's what it is. That they're 52.48. So this is a lot closer than most people thought it was going to be as well. And we probably got about 1.2 of about 1.5 or 1.6 million votes in. So we got over 300,000 or 400,000 votes to come in here on Election Day. And the question is, who came to vote today? That's going to determine this race. It's going to determine the judges' races. And I'll tell you, I was out driving around town today, and I didn't see a lot of turnout any place. I mean, I didn't see any lines any place. But I stopped by a couple of African-American boxes, and they were really, really slow. And so I heard anecdotally that Out in Cypress, they were still voting pretty good, in Kingwood and West Houston. So it looks like to me it may be a better Republican turnout today than Democratic turnout. If that's the case, some of these judges are in trouble, and that proposition, the flood proposition tax is in trouble.
Holly, we live in one of the most storm vulnerable major metropolises in this country. Hurricanes are part of our life here.
Every year.
Harvey happened just a few years ago. Can you believe those numbers?
I can believe the numbers because the voters just approved a flood bond issue. The county did get COVID relief funds that they could have used. We got $1 billion in ARPA funds that they could have used for one-time expenses. And so I think there's some frustration with the county and the way they're managing their budget. They started a lot of new social programs instead of addressing these core services, these core functions of the county government, which are infrastructure, which includes flood mitigation. And Tom Ramsey, our county commissioner, has been pointing out that the county has not even been maintaining the current flood infrastructure. And so I think there's a lot of frustration, especially out in those areas that Bill referred to. If you've got, some of the more Republican portions of the county coming out to vote on election day, they may not be as excited about increasing their taxes. Let's also keep in mind that the county's already approved a ginormous tax
15%,
increase
15%
all
as
property owners.
reported by Bill King, without a vote of the people.
Correct.
Double digits.
And by the way,
you go.
They have not sent those tax bills out yet. I'll bet they show up this week later after
the
the
election.
So, Blaine, is it do or die for Harris County residents if this doesn't pass?
I wouldn't say do or die, but it would force, if it doesn't pass, I think it would force the county to go back and look at what else it's spending money on and then maybe restructure for flood funding, because it is important. They know it's critical, although they don't, the majority at Commissioner's Court doesn't spend as though it's critical. And so I think if it did fail, they would have to take a look and see what they can do internally. But I think this is what you see in difference with the proposal for HISD. In this, we've had a unified Commissioner's Court that has kind of been pushing this, and even Commissioner Ramsey, who got dealt a bad deal with the last flood bond, said that he's going to give this a try, whereas you have no elected leaders other than Harris County Judge Lena Hidalgo supporting the HISD bond. And so I think there's a difference there in terms of who you see supporting it and why they're doing the things that they're doing. Institutional
knowledge, Isaiah and I have it. You know who was heading up the HISD bond effort 12 years ago, which actually passed? His name is Bill King. What Charles Blaine didn't suggest, but he said you could come back as early as next May. How would you pose this bond question?
So I'll give you a little history about HISD bonds. HISD actually had a bond fail in 1996. Went down, I think, 53-47, as I recall. They took 2 years rebuilding the trust, and they had another bond election in '98, and they passed it overwhelmingly. You've got to have some time to rebuild trust. The problem here is that when you're running a school bond campaign, there's basically 3 groups you got to worry about. You've got the teachers unions and the PTO people and all them. They typically vote for bonds in big numbers. You've got fiscal conservatives that don't like bonds, and they typically vote a majority against it. And then you've got the persuadable people in the middle. In this case, they didn't have any of those groups. I mean, the conservatives didn't like it. It was so big. The institutional education people didn't like it because of Miles, so they didn't have a base to rely on. And I think that Charles makes a good point, which is, Paul, I think, made the point, is that even if they come back with something that made more sense, I thought $4.4 billion was way too much myself, but if they came back with something that made more sense, then, the question is, are the anti-Miles people still going to come out and vote against it? And if they're voting against it, I'm not sure you can pass a bond in HISD right now.
If I can just say, I think there's a lot that the administration needs to do, whether or not they choose to pursue a bond in May, to build trust with the community. Because it's not just, and I'm not saying you're insinuating this, but it's not just that people didn't like him. It's the relationship they've had. I mean, I watched a board meeting where they begged him to turn around and face them, and he looked at the board and said, this is a public meeting, not a meeting for the public, and then turned back and talked to the board. And so there have been these kind of instances of disrespect and frustration that the community has rightfully had, and I think it's up to the administration, regardless of what they choose to do moving forward, they need to start building that again.
Paul, take 30 seconds.
Yeah, so money was spent. A lot of money was spent to defeat the bond. The National Union, AFT, came out, and everyone can say no trust, no bond. Those signs are all over the place. So this was something that there was a unified effort against it. There was nobody behind it except the local business community. And so I'm not surprised at all it failed. I am surprised by the degree to which it's failing.
And for you guys, is this the community cutting off its nose to spite its face? Because then you're left behind with the children who are in some of these buildings where there are cases of mold and no air conditioning, which we've all reported on. So will the children eventually suffer if we don't address this?
For sure.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Here's what I didn't like about it. HISD's enrollment is down 50,000 kids in the last decade, from 220 down to 170. HISD, by its own projections, says we're going down to about 160,000 kids over the next few years. We've got a lot of schools that currently have like a third of the kids enrolled than the school was designed for. We need to close some schools in HISD, and that's very unpopular, and they didn't want to talk about doing that because they're afraid it would hurt the, but the truth of the matter is HISD needs to be right-sized, but we do need to fix these, chronic problems.
All right.
Okay.
That's pretty good. I mean, look, is any bond going to pass if Mike Miles is superintendent?
I don't know.
No.
I don't think so. Do you?
I don't think they will, but I do think there is a pathway, but that pathway is going to take probably 2 years, year and a half for that to happen. And in that year and a half, by the time the bond actually is implemented and money is spent, this year's 6th graders are going to be in their senior year. And that just seems like an awfully long time to tell kids to suffer in these dilapidated buildings where mold is high and where, HVACs are warm.
All right, guys, stick with us here on our election night coverage. We will continue after this break. Stay with us.
Fox 26 is YouTube page. Like and subscribe today.
And you're looking at the latest numbers in the U.S. Senate race. Ted Cruz versus Colin Allred. And of course, Cruz has 52% and Allred has 46%, one of the most expensive Senate races here in Texas.
6-point margin there. You surprised, Charles Blaine?
No, I mean, I think there was a two big things I think played out. Colin Allred didn't do what he needed to do in terms of getting Hispanics, and I know we often talk about how they're not a monolith, but I don't think he invested the time in the community to do that. And then the second thing is, I think, like we mentioned before, towards the end of the race, when Cruz started hitting him on his positions on boys and girls sports, he kind of waffled on that. Then he started trying to back off of it, and then you saw Democrats get frustrated with him, saying that they were abandoning him. Republicans are never going to accept him because of how he voted on the issue, and so he kind of started losing constituency. And so I think those things are playing out against him.
Holly, what's your read on those numbers?
Well, you know, I think that from what I'm seeing from my staff or our team over at the Texan News is that Cruz is actually outperforming some of his 2018 numbers. But of course, you know, he suffered a little bit this year because of, you know, what happened during the freeze, Winter Storm Uri and so forth. Yes, so we saw that. But again, when it comes down to those policy issues, Texans were still more in the Ted Cruz camp than they were in the Colin Allred camp. Again, on the issue of the biological boys and girls sports, that was a huge problem for Allred, and also some of his comments on border security and some of his votes in that area. That's a very important issue to Texans, and especially here in Houston, where we have been talking about the illegal immigrants who made their way to Houston and have been charged in the killing of that 12-year-old girl, Jocelyn Nungare. Big issues for Texans.
Bill King has made the point that these Texas Democrats have to toe the line in Washington with the national Democrats, and then they build a record that is highly progressive and that they cannot explain away or run away from. And a perfect example could be the energy sector. You know, in particular, the exportation of liquid natural gas.
Like all these things, and the congressional leadership, you know, cracks the whip and says, you've got to vote for this. Allred took 3 votes on this, boys and girls sports, which, you know, look, for however many times it happened, I mean, it's not, if I had to list the 100 most important issues in Texas, it wouldn't be on that list. But it's a way of subliminally saying, he's not one of us. You know, he's not like us. And so it's a very effective campaign tool. And the congressional Democrats, and I suspect big Democratic donors, forced him to take 3 votes on that, so he had a record on it. The same with the LNG export ban, or pause, whatever they called it. You know, look, I mean, nobody in Texas wanted that. I mean, how many, 500,000-600,000 jobs associated with that industry? And you're going to go as a Texas congressman and vote for that? You know, there used to be a time when the congressional leadership would say, vote your district, protect yourself. Mm-hmm. But that's not the case anymore. In these highly ideological times, you're forced to toe the party line, and it ends up hurting them when they come back and try to run.
And of course, Paul, they always say down ballot is important, especially in the presidential election. Is Ted Cruz holding its own, or is Donald Trump helping him with the turnout and the votes?
Well, what it looked like in the early voting is that Trump was actually outperforming Cruz. So there are still people who just don't like Cruz very much, and I think that's showing up in the vote. I think what Texas is needing and didn't get is something of a John Fetterman type character, a person who, to Bill's point, goes against the grain, goes against the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And because Allred seemed to have aligned himself with that progressive group, that just doesn't have a lot of play here in Texas.
Charles, our good friend Gary Pollan calls this phenomenon Texas fools go gold for Democrats. They keep throwing millions of dollars at Texas, hoping for the best and getting the same result.
They do, and they keep saying that we just got to turn out a few more voters, and I mean, ultimately, yeah, that's true, but it's not happening. But I think what they do end up doing by spending a lot of money is they get those down ballots. They get the people that are excited to come out and vote for someone who might be shiny at the top, and it's kind of like a sacrificial lamb, and then they can win some of these judicial races and things like that. Although that doesn't seem to be happening this time around. I think that plan that has worked in the past is probably not working this time.
And Bill, you mentioned this in the race for District 18, and Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and Sylvester Turner now running for that. When we talk about this Senate seat, if Texans were to go for Allred, would we lose a lot of influence in the Senate as a result of replacing Ted Cruz?
I don't know. He's not liked that well in the Senate, so I'm not sure about that. But he's got some seniority there. Look, if you look at the statewide results, they look a lot like previous elections. I mean, even at the early votes, and I mean the Republicans are way ahead, and the independents are breaking that direction. I mean, I think the big news about Texas statewide results is there's no news. It's exactly like previous election. The big news is the stuff that's going on in Harris County tonight.
Yeah. Well, Holly, there has been talk about the firewall of flipping the Senate red, and that could give some what's the right word? Non-Trumpers in the Republican Party the opportunity to say, you know, I'm going to sit that one out. But it looks like that firewall is going to happen, or at least the Texas part of it.
The Texas part is going to happen, and we also saw some very strong numbers coming out of Montana. So if we're talking about the U.S. Senate, we're talking about what we're looking at is probably a Republican Senate. So you're getting the West Virginia seat, most likely the Montana seat. I haven't looked at those numbers tonight, but the polling was looking very strong to unseat Tester.
I don't think Montana's closed the polls yet.
Yeah. They're going to pick that up, and we're probably going to see a Republican Senate going forward. I don't think that, you know, the quote never Trumpers are going to be opposed to having Republicans in control of the Senate. I think they're going to be pretty happy for that, and they're going to expect those never Trumpers, Republicans in the Senate, to kind of hold the line if Trump should be the next president.
No, I think you misunderstood me. Maybe I wasn't clear.
Okay, I thought you said that.
You know, no, look, having a Republican firewall in the Senate to a possible Harris White House.
Absolutely. Okay. Yes.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that, yes, for those who were just so disgusted with Trump that they couldn't bring themselves to vote for him, they'll be very happy to see Republicans controlling that Senate to be a check on the White House, as our system was set up to do. We do like that. You know, hear a lot of complaints about gridlock in Congress and that kind of thing, but that's sometimes a good thing, to keep the brakes on, you know, too much momentum on what might be just a temporary popular wave towards a particular policy. So yeah, I think they're very happy about that situation. The House, of course, is going to be a little bit more complicated, and I don't think we're going to know what the composition is right away. I think it's going to take a few days.
And Blaine, obviously this is not the run for the White House, it's not the presidential race, but do you think we will see a conclusion, a definitive winner here in this U.S. Senate race with Ted Cruz and Colin Allred?
I think so. I think it's going to be an easier one to determine once we start getting more in. So luckily, unlike some of these other, like the presidential race, I don't think we're going to be waiting days for it. I think we will have something, and probably early once they start. I mean, some of the bigger counties probably have to get some of their boxes in, but once we start getting close to at least half the counties, I think it'll be easy enough. Yeah,
we're going to have Mark Jones in here in the next segment. We'll see how close he is to calling that race.
Statewide races got updated. He's up 10 points now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
all
there
right.
you go.
Okay, well, what are we talking about now? Hey, Taylor Johnson.
Let's turn now to the race for the White House, as both presidential candidates are waiting anxiously, along with millions of Americans, to find out who will be the next president of the United States.
Fox's Rebecca Castro reports from Florida, where Trump is waiting for results. Rebecca.
Isaiah and Greg, we are at the Palm Beach County Convention Center, where the Trump campaign is hosting its election night watch party. They feel they're on track for a good night. There's a lot of supporters here. They cheer every time a state is called for former President Trump. But he is watching this all go down at home at Mar-a-Lago with a small group of family and friends.
I think we're going to have a very big victory today.
The former president is feeling optimistic that voters will put him back in the White House. But it will all come down to voter turnout today.
The country that I'm living in is not the country I was born into. The only one who's putting America first is Donald Trump.
I voted for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. It's time for a change, moving forward in a better and uplifting way.
It's likely to be a long night as results slowly trickle in, and there's a possibility that a winner will not be declared before the night is over, something Trump calls an outrage.
It should never happen. A thing like that should never happen. This election should be over.
With 19 electoral votes, all eyes will be on Pennsylvania tonight. It's the state both candidates spent the most time and money in and see as a must-win.
The reality is whoever wins Pennsylvania is likely to be president.
Vice President Harris keeping a low profile today. speaking with several radio stations in a last-minute effort to get out the vote. She says Americans are ready for a fresh start.
Frankly, I think people are exhausted with this spirit and this approach that's been about trying to divide people and have them turn and point fingers at each other. I think people are done with that.
Today, if he'll accept the results of the election if he loses. He said if it's, quote, a fair election, I'll be the first to acknowledge it. Isaiah, Greg, back to you guys.
Thank you, Rebecca. And the race for the White House is on everyone's mind, top issue tonight. And of course, we have with us Mark. Glad to have you here on The Factor.
That's okay. We'll take it. Mark Jones. Mark Jones.
It's not The Factor. But your thoughts on what we're seeing in the presidential race here in Texas and around the country?
Well, Trump's winning by a large margin. It looks like it may hit the double digits. We still don't have Hidalgo County, Cameron County, and Webb County from South Texas coming in, but Trump has the race won, and Ted Cruz will win the Senate race. The only question is by how much, and it looks very likely he's going to win it by a substantially larger margin than the 2.8% he defeated Beto O'Rourke by back in 2018. I mean, what really for me is interesting is what's happening in Harris County. Harris County is a bluish county where the Republicans invested virtually no money in the DA race, the sheriff race, or the other countywide races, with the exception of a judicial campaign towards the end. And yet Republicans are within 2 points, sometimes a little ahead, sometimes a little behind all of their Democratic rivals, with the exception of popular Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, who has a 5-point advantage. If Election Day turnout leans Republican, we could see a real shocker. If it leans Democrat, you're going to have Democrats, I think, breathe a sigh of relief, and a lot of Republicans rue what might have been had they invested anywhere close to the amount of money that they invested back in 2022.
Yeah, Mark, we were really expecting a larger margin for the Democrats. What do you think is driving this?
It's unclear. I mean, even Trump is only losing by about 6 points, and he lost by 13 back in 2020. I think a lot of it's just Democratic turnout is low. Republicans are more enthused, and we're seeing that across the state. It looks like, I think if we look at sort of some of the traditional Democratic groups, Texas Organizing Project, and people like Rodney Ellis here, John Wiley Price up in Dallas, I don't know if they engaged in the same level of intensity in terms of turnout this cycle than they did 2 years ago.
Well, since I talked to the 4 people on this panel almost on a weekly, sometimes daily, hourly basis, do you think it has anything to do with the spotlight that's been put on public safety and the erosion of public safety over the course of 4 or 5 years?
Well, there's probably a lot to do with that, and the fact that the one Democrat who was very supportive of a more law and order approach, Kim Ogg, was ousted by a large margin in her primary, probably didn't help the party with that image. And the Democratic judges, some good, some bad, are all in many ways tarnished by the behavior of sort of maybe their less objective, more pro de-incarceration or pro latitude policies of their fellows. And I think, even things like immigration, you saw the Cruz campaign found that the best way to tie immigration and really make it resonate with people was to link it to crime. That is, it wasn't just the immigration in general, it was the immigration, and then that increased the threat. And we had the tragic case of Jocelyn Nungaray, who was killed by 2 Venezuelan immigrants, it was a sort of prototypical or example for the Biden administration's lack of vetting, in that you had 2 individuals who have no real legitimate asylum claim and yet were stopped, looked at for a day or so, and not even really less than a day, released, and then left to go on their way.
All right, we're going to go to an update on the Harris County races.
Yes. Over 76.9% of voters in 2020 and in 66% in 2016. For example, those early voting results reflect a large share of total votes. The first results released tonight will include more than 1.23 million voters cast a ballot during the early voting period. Our commitment to accurate, secure results means we follow a thorough process to count each ballot correctly. Harris County's size and voter population, we are the 3rd largest county in the nation and the largest county in the state of Texas. 700 vote centers. That means 700 vote centers that will need to make sure every voter has cast their ballot, completes paperwork, breaks down their equipment, and then reports that equipment to rally sites on tonight. This is our new election headquarters here near Bush Intercontinental Hotel. This new facility houses all of our employees and temps. What you will witness here tonight is one of the sites where judges will bring in their boxes and information on this evening. So when you ask me when we'll have the total amount of results, I'm going to say once again, buckle up, because this will be a late night. Those 700 Election Day polls will need to follow all procedures guided by the Texas Election Code. Bring those items in. We intend to do that in a secure and efficient manner. We will not rush. We will be accurate. Accuracy and efficiency is what's most important. And as we go about that on tonight, you all will be updated every hour on the hour, as much as we can provide as those results come in for the day. So again, Harris County, we've had a successful, smooth election. I want to say that again. Today, we have had a successful, smooth election, and it took thousands of individuals to be able to make sure that today turned out the way that it did. So kudos to the voters, kudos to those election workers who are still working into the evening, and to all of our staff and support. And kudos to all of you for making sure that the information that is shared with our voters and your listeners and viewers was accurate and timely in terms of sharing this vital information. It is not lost upon me on how important it is to run elections, not only in the largest county in the state of Texas, but in our nation. It is my great honor to serve as the county clerk, and it is my great honor to take your questions.
Can you tell us, compared to 2020, the total voter turnout, what was the percentage in 2020? What's the percentage tonight?
Yeah, so we just talked about that during early voting, 76.9%. Here in early voting this period, over 40%. There was not a huge, large margin in terms of early voting. We're still following election.
And of course, now we're going to go to former Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner, who is running for Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee's spot in District 18. Let's go there and check in live.
This country have been blessed from her presence and from her work. I just want to start off by just thanking Elwin. Elwin is a quiet but effective soul, and someone who was married to the Congresswoman for more than 50 years. And he doesn't say a whole lot. Yeah. But his presence is so felt. So I just want us to take the opportunity to really give a strong shout out to Elwin Lee. Give it up to Elwin Lee. Because Elwin and Sheila Jackson Lee have given birth to two incredible children. Jason, who's stepping in his own right, doing his own thing in Chicago, working with the mayor in Chicago, and just an exceptional leader himself. And then, of course, now the Congresswoman-elect, Erica Lee Carter. And just think, for the 18th Congressional District, Mickey Leland, Barbara Jordan, Mickey Leland, Craig Washington, Sheila Jackson Lee, and now Erica Lee Carter. Give it up to Erica Lee Carter. And I want to say I've had the privilege of knowing both Jason and Erica pretty much all of their lives. But over the last month or so, to be on the campaign trail with Erica has just been an exceptional blessing. It's one thing to have been out there working alongside Sheila Jackson Lee, but to now have had the opportunity to work and to campaign alongside Erica has just been a special blessing. She's not trying to step into the shoes of her mom, but let me tell you, She is more than prepared to walk in her own path and to champion her own causes. And I have no doubt that starting tomorrow, really starting tomorrow, that she will represent the 18th Congressional District extremely well. Give it up to Erica Lee Carter one more time. And then to all of those who work very closely with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, I'm not going to call everybody's name. Erica has called them before. I do want to acknowledge Gerald. Gerald, thank you so very much. I want to especially acknowledge Gerald and Commissioner Rodney Ellis. Alicia is here in her own right, but the commissioner is out of the state. So I do want to thank Gerald and Commissioner Rodney Ellis for their support, for their encouragement. And I want to thank the Lee family for embracing me and for supporting me. They didn't have to. They could have just, dealt with their own mom's laws, wife's laws, but they embraced me and supported me. So I want to personally, Elvin and all of you, I want to thank you all for being there for me on this new journey. And then I want to personally acknowledge my own family. Give it up to my daughter, Ashley Page Turner, to my son-in-law, Jimmy, Captain, and I said Ashley Page Turner, Captain, I should say, and to Jimmy, Captain, and then to the new addition, to Jameson Turner, Captain, my grandson. Please give it up to all of them. I was going to have my grandson speak tonight, but I decided, I don't want to rush him too quickly onto the main stage. So, but I want to thank all of them for the sacrifice that they are making, which is enabling me to take this step. To be honest with you, my intent was to devote much of my time to them and to my other sisters and brothers going forward. But I want to thank them for their continuous support, for always being there, for the encouragement. I appreciate them. And then lastly, and I'll be done, as we move forward, it's important that we work together. Democrats, we have a role to play. And we need to play that role very well. When it comes to the needs that exist within the 18th, we have to make sure that we are responsive to the needs of every single person in the 18th, regardless of who they look like, regardless of their social economic status, regardless of their sexual orientation, regardless of whether they are housed or unhoused. Every single person needs a champion as we move forward. And people need to be seen and people need to be heard. All of us tonight have been extremely blessed. And we all have a super role model in order to point to and be guided by. But this is our moment. And this is our opportunity to really lift up every single person in the 18th Congressional District. And we need to make sure that just like we have been blessed, that we pass those blessings on to someone else. And so if we had our brothers, we would not be here tonight under these circumstances. But here we find ourselves, and in the spirit of Sheila Jackson Lee, in the spirit of her energy and her tenacity, let us move forward and to be able to say we're not going to accept things any kind of way. That is important for every voice in the 18th Congressional District, that their voice to be amplified. And whatever we can do, let's do our part to make a positive difference. That's my pledge to you.
And that is former Mayor Sylvester Turner claiming victory in the 18th Congressional District, the seat that was once held by Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. But a crazy night in Harris County when it comes to Republicans and Democrats. I'm looking at this list here, and it's almost neck and neck. Dan Simons and Sean Tier, Jacqueline Smith and Christian Menifee, Harris County Attorney, Sheriff Mike Knox and Ed Gonzalez. All of these races are very close. Mark, your thoughts on this? What are we seeing in Harris County?
It's a big surprise. I mean, polling before, as well as pretty much everybody's sort of general guess prior to the election, was that it would be a Democratic wave, or at least a Democratic victory by 8 to 10 points. Crime's clearly at the top of people's agenda, and it's trickling down to Fort Bend County as well, where we're seeing some similar results. It's just a really bad night for Democrats here in Harris County, due perhaps to crime and due perhaps to a lack of mobilization. And they're really placing all of their hopes on the Election Day vote, because if the Election Day vote just leans slightly Republican, you're going to have a sea change in Harris County government.
Yeah, I'm looking over at Harris County GOP leadership, and they're saying, we don't need no stinking commercials. I don't know. I mean, Charles, this is pretty stunning.
I mean, it is. And the party, I think for the judicial candidates, they had all these outside affiliate groups. A lot of the Court of Appeals candidates kind of did their own thing. So there were all these kind of unique efforts that were going on at the same time. And again, this is now, I keep saying year 6. I don't know exactly what year it is, but we're a number of years into repeatedly beating this message into voters' heads every election cycle, from the mayoral cycle to the county judge to the judicial cycle. Crime is always at the top of people's minds, and it's always, there's a lot of money behind it being spent to send it into people's homes.
Bill King, final word?
Buckle up for 26, because the Republicans have an advantage in gubernatorial years because the turnout's down so much. They came, they knocked off 5 judges in 2 years ago, and with this race being this close, if this had been a gubernatorial election, every Democratic judge would have lost.
Holly Hansen told me it's going to be closer than it's projected. You told me that. I want to give you credit for it. What made you think that?
I just saw the momentum, and I saw people who would typically vote Democrat talking about how they would vote for Harris and they would vote for Allred, but they were voting for these Republican judges over the crime issue. I mean, we have seen time and time again these victims of crime in Harris County. We've seen these judges sort of unapologetically say they oppose pretrial incarceration, getting these repeat violent offenders coming through their courts and just releasing them on bond.
All right. Stick with us. Our election night coverage will continue, and we'll be back after the break. Don't go anywhere.
Fox 26 is your This YouTube page. Like and subscribe today.
And welcome back tonight. And this is shaping up to be a very long night for several races, including the presidential race.
With more on what happens next, we go to our Lena DeFlorius in the newsroom. Lena.
Yes, I want to give you an update here. So far, 22 states have been called. Not all of these have been called, but they're trending. One of the states that has been called is Texas with 40 electoral votes. That's been called for President Trump, who is in the lead right now with 188 electoral votes versus Harris's 99. Remember, the magic number that you're looking for here is 270. So what happens next? After tonight, there is a process here. We know for certain we will know the results if it's an extended amount of time by December the 8th. That's what's called Safe Harbor Day. That's basically the date that states have to turn in their certifications. There's no passes date. They're due. There's no more waiting. Then on the 17th of December is when the electors meet, including Texas's 40 electoral slate. They're all going to meet. They cast their vote. Then you move into next year. On the 3rd is when the new Congress will swear in. And no matter who wins the election for the Oval Office, Vice President Harris will be the one who swears in Congress. Why? Because the Vice President of the United States is also the President of the Senate. Now, Congressional certification happens on January 6th. This is where things got a little bumpy in 2020. Once that happens, we move into January 20th, which is Inauguration Day for the 47th President. Now, how long is this going to take? What are we waiting on here? Let me walk you through a couple of things that have happened in the past. Now, in 2020, 4 days. It took us until Saturday before we finally found the presumptive winner was going to be President Biden. In 2016, when you went to bed on Tuesday, you weren't quite sure just yet, but by the time you woke up on Wednesday, you knew that Trump was the presumptive winner. It was announced at 1:49 in the morning in Houston time. But let's go back to 2000. We had to wait for 36 days before the results came in. This is with that hanging Chad debacle in Florida, and it took 36 days to get the results. Closing up next at the top of the hour, 5 states, including the battleground state of Nevada.
Thanks to our panel of guests, and thank you for joining us on this election night.
Stay with us. Our election night coverage continues in just a few minutes with Fox 26 News at 9.
Fox 26 is your YouTube page. Like and subscribe today. Fox 26 News at 9 starts now.
Good evening to you. Welcome to your You Decide 2024 coverage. I'm Rashi Vats.
And I'm Anthony Antoine. Let's get right to those election numbers you are waiting for. So far right now, we will start with the U.S. presidential race nationally. What you're looking at now are the Electoral college votes, 188 of them in the column secured for former President Donald Trump, 99 as of right now for Vice President Kamala Harris. Remember, the magic number here tonight is 270. As we look statewide, the state of Texas has now been called for former President Donald Trump with 4.5 million votes in comparison to the VP Kamala Harris with 3.6, and that is with about 65% of the votes counted so far.
Now let's look at the Senate race. It's extremely close. We've been closely monitoring this one for you. Right now, we have Republican Ted Cruz, who is the incumbent seeking his third term, at over 4 million votes cast so far. We do know that Democrat Colin Allred has a little over also 3 million votes, closer to 4 million. We know 65% of those votes have been counted so far, and Colin Allred is a current U.S. representative for District 32, running on a platform emphasizing health care, voting rights, and bipartisanship. It's really going to be a close race for both of them. Well, we are covering both sides of the U.S. Senate race here in Texas. Tom Ziska is live in Dallas covering Democrat Colin Allred.
And Sherman DeSell is at the camp for Republican Senator Ted Cruz. Sherman.
Yeah, so, we see that race is pretty close, but the folks here in the Marriott Marquis downtown are already calling a victory. I'm going to get out of the shot a little bit. Josh is going to kind of show you the excitement. A lot of people have come up to the stage because we just heard that Senator Ted Cruz will be making his appearance pretty shortly, within the next few minutes. A lot of his team, some of his family members were on stage throwing out T-shirts with shirt cannons. A lot of excitement. The music's loud. Everybody's excited, and they're also still watching the races in real time come in. Those results come in throughout the country. Paying attention to that balance of power. We've been speaking to people off camera who they say they're excited about tonight, and they said that they didn't expect anything less than what this was, than what we've seen so far. Their goal is to keep Texas, Texas again. That's what that's the motto of Ted Cruz's campaign. But again, we're still waiting on the senator to appear on stage, but they are calling a victory here at his camp downtown Houston. We're going to turn it over to you guys and check in with the Colin Allred campaign in Dallas. Tom?
Sherman, in the Dallas, they are not ready to claim defeat by any stretch of the imagination here at the Colin Allred Watch Party. There is a sizable crowd of his supporters there watching returns from across the country, cheering when there are results that they approve of and being fairly silent when there are results that they don't care for. Former gubernatorial candidate Wendy Davis was just on the stage talking to them, talking to people who are refreshing their browsers to check on results, who are seeing that the numbers are favoring Ted Cruz right now. And Wendy Davis saying, you need to know that the biggest, bluest areas of Texas, as she said, have not yet been fully counted. So there's lots of votes for us yet to collect. So that elicited a cheer. They continue to remain very hopeful here at the Colin Allred campaign. Nowhere close to being ready to call it. If Ted Cruz is ready to take the stage, I think Colin Allred may have something to say at this point. As for when he may appear here, we were told sometime in the not too distant future. That's as definitive as it gets as we continue to watch these returns. And Colin Allred tries to become the first Democrat elected senator from the state of Texas since Lloyd Benson in 1988. Live in Dallas tonight, I'm Tom Ziska, Fox 26 News.
All right, Tom, thank you. And just like Tom and Sherman were saying in their live shots, the votes are being counted right now, and they're being counted over at Harris County election headquarters as well.
Fox 26's Abigail Dye is there covering this for us tonight. Abigail.
Yes, Rashi Anthony, there are millions of ballots being counted here tonight, and we do have some updated numbers for you on how that count is going. So we do know that 1.23 million people in Harris County voted early before Election Day. And as of right now, as of about 8:50 rather, 319,000 people have cast their votes in person in Harris County, and 299 voting centers are still open. So when we say that the last person in line at 7 p.m. is the last person to cast the vote, that's very true. These voting centers are still working to process all of those ballots. And we'll show you some video that we just took here at the headquarters about 15 minutes ago or so. This is some of that election equipment coming into the headquarters from those polling locations. We have 700 polling locations, and this equipment physically comes to these headquarters here and other rally sites. There are 5 others in Harris County to be processed and looked over. And the Harris County clerk tells us that it's a very meticulous process. They make sure to go through lots of procedure for every one of these votes.
Harris County's size and voter population, we are the 3rd largest county in the nation and the largest county in the state of Texas. 700 vote centers. That means 700 vote centers that will need to make sure every voter has cast their ballot, completes paperwork, breaks down their equipment, and then reports that equipment to rally sites on tonight. So when you ask me when we'll have the total amount of results, I'm going to say once again, buckle up, because this will be a late night.
Again, 299 voting centers still processing those votes. This election equipment coming in the doors here right now. It is going to be a long night for these election workers as we work to get these election results in. Now, we're told that there should be another press briefing between 9 and 10 p.m. So, of course, when we get those updates, we'll bring them straight to you.
All right, Abigail Dye reporting live for us there. Still ahead, 2 major bonds on the ballot for Houston ISD schools. We're going over the latest results up next.
Well, it was a super wet and stormy start to our election day, but we are pleasant and drying out even more all across the state for our election night. Coming up, I'll let you know just how long the quiet and cooler weather will stick around. I'm tracking our next front and also a brand new hurricane in the Caribbean. I'll let you know where it's headed coming up.
Welcome back to our You Decide 2024 coverage here now. This is Proposition A, flood control tax. 51.2% of folks in favor of it, against 48.8% of folks saying they are against. Now, this right here would essentially increase the flood control district's property tax rate by 57% compared to last year. So this will allow them to operate and maintain some of the infrastructure there to try to reduce flooding throughout the community.
Now switching over to the propositions that will impact the Houston Independent School District.
And
this has really made headlines nationwide.
All right, so let's look at those results. What do we have here? We're going to start with Proposition A. This is the bulk of it. This one is $3.96 billion to renovate, rebuild, and expand aging school facilities. Now, throughout the summer months, you've seen folks talk about the infrastructure and the upgrades needed to schools because it's hot. Well, 60% of folks are saying they are against Proposition A, 40% saying they are for it.
All right, now let's look at Proposition B. This proposal is seeking $440 million. So this money would go towards things like updating technology for students and staff, like updating equipment systems and infrastructure, and it would increase property taxes. And right now we're looking at 60% saying that they are against Prop B, 40% are for it. Now let's go to Fox 26's Jonathan Mejia, who is live at the HISD headquarters with how things are looking there.
Rashi, Anthony, it's a total of $4.4 billion. Superintendent Mike Miles told Greg Grugan on West Your Point the money is necessary to make adjustments and changes to the district. However, State Representative and former HISD appointed board member Jolanda Jones disagrees.
We have a lot of health and safety issues first, and by that I mean perimeter fencing, security of our schools. 221 of our 274 schools do not have a vestibule where you have to buzz in to get in, you get seen, and then you buzz in again. That's a vestibule, single point of entry. We have air conditioning units, heating and cooling systems. Everybody knows about that.
Mike Miles has basically created the emergencies that he's begging for bond money for. For example, in one day, he fired over 1,200 people. He fired bus drivers, and so you wonder why kids aren't getting to school on time and the buses aren't running. Well, when you fire all the bus drivers, that's what happens. When you fire the HVAC people, and now you're complaining that your air conditioners don't work, you literally have created the emergency.
So Proposition A is looking for the issuance of $3.96 billion in bonds to fund several projects within HISD, including the construction of new school buildings, renovation and expansion of existing schools to update facilities, safety and security upgrades, the purchase of land for future school sites. Now, Proposition B would authorize the district to issue $440 million in bonds to fund technology equipment and systems for students and staff, technology infrastructure improvements such as better network connectivity, cybersecurity measures and system enhancements, instructional technology upgrades which will ensure classrooms are equipped with modern tools for digital learning, including computers, tablets, and smart boards. As we heard at the top of this news report, 60% of the early voting shows that voters are voting against both Proposition A and B. We have the latest of those numbers on our website at fox26houston.com. For now, reporting live outside the HISD headquarters, Jonathan Mejia, Fox 26 News.
All right, we want to go back out now to Ted Cruz's camp. We understand he just took the stage. Let's hear what his remarks are.
Right now, we're up by 8 points at over 600,000 votes. And they're still counting votes. It also looks very likely that we're going to have a Republican Senate next year. And I believe, and I hope and pray, that Donald Trump will be reelected as President of the United States. I want to say thank you, number one, to my extraordinary wife, Heidi, my best friend in the world. Such an amazing partner on this magic carpet ride of life. And I want to say thank you to our two beautiful and amazing girls, Caroline and Catherine. You know, politics at times exacts a price on the family. And I want to say I am so grateful for their love and support, and you guys are amazing. Thank you. I also want to give a special shout out to Alexis.
All right, you can continue to watch this on Fox Local. But again, Ted Cruz is making some remarks here. He says they are now up 8% with 600,000 votes. But again, we heard earlier from the Allred camp saying that there's still more Democratic strongholds where those votes are still needing to be counted. We can continue to follow that. You see here 67% of the vote is in, but Ted Cruz claiming victory. We'll be right back with more as we continue your 2024 coverage here of the election. We're going to be following the Fort Bend County Commissioner's race between Andy Myers and Taral Patel. The latest results coming up next.
Welcome back. Tonight, we are also watching several races in Fort Bend County.
Let's look at the current results now for Fort Bend County Sheriff. Fort Bend County Sheriff, we have the Republican Marshall Slott up against the incumbent Eric Fagan. We have right now the Republican ahead with 150,000 votes against the incumbent Fagan with 147,000 votes now. So we continue to watch this race here for you. Very close one.
And here's another one that we're watching closely for you. Republican Andy Myers, a longtime incumbent, actually since 1997, going against Democrat Taral Patel. Now we see that Andy Myers is leading the polls with 39,244 votes. Taral Patel trailing behind at 26,938 votes. And we do know that Patel has been under a lot of controversy because he's been indicted on multiple charges related to online harassment and impersonation. We have Fox 26's Randy Wallace live in Richmond at Andy Myers' watch party. Randy.
Yeah, that's right. Now, this local race was ripe with political scandal, probably the biggest political scandal Fort Bend County has seen in recent memory. Taral Patel left his job as County Judge K.P. George's chief of staff to run for Commissioner 3. Now, he went from being a rising star in the Fort Bend County Democratic Party to a candidate now charged with 4 felonies and 4 misdemeanors. While running for commissioner, Patel talked about being the target of disgusting racist rants, and he feared for his safety. But according to investigators, Patel wasn't the victim. He was the one posting the online racist rants, posing as other people. Now, all the charges he faces center around those racist posts. Now, Patel's challenger incumbent, Andy Myers, is expected to win. He's held this office since 1997, and we expect to be hearing from him fairly soon here at his watch party. Reporting live from Fort Bend County, Randy Wallace, Fox 26 News.
All right, Randy, thank you so much. And we are going now to our political reporter, Greg Rugen, and Rice political analyst, Mark Jones, with more analysis of the races we are watching unfold here tonight. Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. Look, Mark, you told me last week that Colin Allred needed a colossal day of effort to catch Ted Cruz. It doesn't appear he got it.
No, not at all. Ted Cruz is on track to a victory. The only question is, does he win by 8 points, 6 points, or 5 points? But it's a strong victory for Cruz, and even stronger victory for Donald Trump, who's right now leading by about 13 points. That'll likely shrink as some election day votes come in. But this has been a pretty dismal showing for Texas Democrats across the board statewide. They're losing in counties or close in counties where they normally win, and they're getting blown out in the more Republican-leaning counties.
Look, a stunning, unforeseen phenomenon underway here in Harris County with Republicans challenging in multiple races. What's happening?
Well, what we're seeing in Harris County is, depending on the Republican or Democrat, they're up by 1 or 2 points. Some races, the Democrats up by 1 or 2 points. Some places, the Republicans up by 1 or 2 points, except for Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, who has a comfortable lead. Republicans are overperforming in the election day vote, and Democrats are underperforming. The crime issue, I think, is having an effect. That is, people are concerned about crime, and they clearly associate Democratic judges, as well as Democratic elected officials lower down with the crime problem in Harris County. And one of their responses was voting for Republicans. But we're also seeing just overall a poor performance by Democrats. Donald Trump is up in the county by is down in the county by 6 points. Joe Biden won it by 13 points back in 2020. The election day results may make those numbers closer, but not that close. And what we're also seeing is Democrats had high hopes they would take the Texas Court of Appeals, the 1st and 14th, which cover Houston, Fort Bend County, Brazoria, and Galveston. They thought with a large margin of victory here in Harris County, they'd be able to sweep those races. With the narrow margins we're seeing here in Fort Bend County and Harris County, Republicans look set to take the 1st and 14th in a sweep, which will give them substantial power in the courts, and that's the lowest court below the Supreme Court and Court of Criminal Appeals statewide.
Okay, much to watch. We'll be right here. Stay with us on Fox 26. Anthony, back to you.
All right, Greg, thank you so much. Coming up, we are checking back in on the presidential race and going over the Electoral College. We'll see which candidate is currently ahead. And before we go, we'll give you a look here at the Harris County Sheriff's race. We have the incumbent, Ed Gonzalez, the Democrat, ahead slightly of Mike Knox, the Republican, 52% in favor of Gonzalez, 48% Knox. Still a very close election here. More to come. Quick reminder here tonight, it's going to be some time before either Vice President Kamala Harris or former President Donald Trump reach that magic number of 270.
That's right. Fox 26's Lena DeFlores is live for us in the newsroom with the latest on the race and how the electoral map is looking. Lena.
Okay, so we have 29 races that have already been called. Not all of these have been called. For instance, Texas has been called for former President Trump, but if you look at the swing state of Arizona, that hasn't been called. So these are the states where the polls have closed, and we're starting to see where they're trending. Right now, the current count is former President Trump with 198 versus Harris with 112. Remember, 270 is the number that you're looking for. You'll also notice that when it comes to the swing states, we're talking Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona. None of these have been called yet, so we still have a lot on the line. But if you're wondering, where do these numbers come from? These are the weirdest numbers. All right, we'll take a look at the Electoral College. As we know, 270 would win. Where does that come from? There are 538 electoral votes, so you cut that in half, you add one, that's your majority of 270. Also, where does this come from, that 538? Odd. All right, it comes from 435 U.S. representatives. You add 100 senators, and you're thinking, Lena, your math is off. I'm still not getting 438. Well, here's why. Don't forget about D.C. Now, D.C. is not a state, so it has no state senators, but you still have nearly 700,000 Americans who live there, so they do get 3 representatives. You add that 3 to the 100 to the 435, that's where you get your 538, and that is the Electoral College. Now, coming up next here at the top of the hour, 10 o'clock, we still have more races. We have 4 more states to be called for a total of 78 electoral votes, but even though it's only 4 states, don't be fooled. It's one of the big ones, the biggest haul of electoral counts. We have California with 54.
All right, Lena, thank you for that breakdown. Well, coming up, we are looking at the Congressional House District 18 races. We're talking about the special election to finish late Sheila Jackson Lee's term. And we now know who is going to take over the next full term. Welcome back to our election night coverage, and we want to remind you that we have continuous results that are scrolling at the bottom of your screen there and also on fox26houston.com.
All right, now let's take a look at the U.S. House District 18 races, both the unexpired term and the open seat left by the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Now, we know here the late Congresswoman's daughter, Erica Lee Carter, is looking to finish out her mother's term, which will end in January. As of right now, with 48% of the estimated votes counted, we now have 69% in favor of Lee Carter against the Republican challenger, Maria Dunn, with 21%.
Now we're looking at the person who's going to fill the next full term for former Sheila Jackson Lee, U.S. House District 18. We know that Democrat Sylvester Turner has won with 118,421 votes. Trailing behind is Republican Lana Santonze. 68% of the votes have been counted so far. Now, Fox 26's Dominique Keith is live at the Sylvester Turner and Erica Lee Carter watch party. Dominique, are they starting to celebrate already?
Yeah, it's a little bit loud in here, so it's difficult to hear you, but there are apparently two winners here in the 18th Congressional District. The late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee's daughter, Erica Lee Carter, apparently elected to finish out her mother's unexpired term until January, and former Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner elected to take the seat in January and hold it for 2 years. Well, I was going to say hello, Mayor, but hello, Congressman-elect.
Look, I'll always respond. You could just say, hey, you. What an incredible evening.
Yeah. How bittersweet is this for you? I know you worked with the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee for a long time.
Well, this one is not just political. This one is personal. Sheila was a personal friend, okay? And over 40 years. You can't replace Sheila Jackson Lee.
Erica, describe what today is like for you.
Bittersweet. This is her favorite day of the year, especially presidential election year with Kamala Harris. And also she would love to have seen this if she had ever retired. So I wish I could tell her.
Retired?
Yeah,
Your mom?
That wasn't going to happen, but just in case. She would have been honored to see my name on the ballot.
You want to continue to bring resources back to the 18th that desperately needs them. When it comes to health care, there are literally thousands of people in the 18th. They don't have access to quality health care like I have received.
You're a cancer survivor.
Look, I'm a cancer survivor. I had the best health care one could imagine, the best, and a huge bill that I never paid one dime for.
I'm just going to complete the cycle for her and be the strong voice that she always was for the people. And I'm just overjoyed.
The 18th Congressional District has been a historic seat held by Barbara Jordan, Mickey Leland, Craig Washington, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, and now her daughter Erica Lee Carter, and Sylvester Turner. Reporting live in the 18th Congressional District, I'm Dominique Keith, Fox 26 News.
All right, Dominique, thank you so much. And on this election day, it was a very rainy one to start, Ramisha, but the good news is by mid-morning, we had a change in the forecast.
A rough start, but a fantastic finish. So that was good. It was wet, stormy this morning. But like I said, for folks heading to the polls in the afternoon, this evening, it was perfectly quiet. So that's the way we like it. It looks like we could have more rough weather towards the end of the work week, but let's enjoy a few quiet, drier days. This morning, though, that was not the case. Some of you picking up anywhere from 1 to over 3 inches of rain, especially over towards Katy, Cypress, Conroe, about 3 inches of rain, almost an inch of rain in Houston. That was the line of storms that roared through here during the early morning hours with that cold front. Ahead of that front, last night it was super windy, that wind coming in out of the south. Temps were in the low 80s for many of you at this time, but tonight, look at this. Refreshing, pleasant, comfortable, many of you in the 60s, low 70s in Houston. How about 65 degrees in Conroe right now? That is 13 degrees colder than you were at this time yesterday. So we are feeling great, more fall-like, and overall it's going to be pleasant and quiet weather that we're dealing with for tonight No rain expected, so you don't have to worry about rowdy storms waking you up tonight or tomorrow morning. I am, however, tracking our next front that should arrive Friday, but that will play a part. I think it's steering what is now Hurricane Rafael away from our area and likely keeping it to our east, but it will likely be pushing into the Gulf of Mexico very soon. Here it is. Of course, it did strengthen to a hurricane this evening, and tonight and tomorrow morning it will be rolling right over that western tip of Cuba where we have hurricane warnings in place. At this point, those winds have increased to around 80 miles per hour, and there is the western side of Cuba. It's going to roll right over Cuba as a hurricane by tomorrow and then push into the eastern Gulf of Mexico and just kind of camp out, hang out through the weekend. Notice it's not really making landfall anywhere through Sunday. According to the National Hurricane Center track, it's just kind of slowing down, weakening back to a tropical storm by Sunday, and then meandering just offshore of that Louisiana Gulf Coast. Notice Houston here, we're close to what will likely be tropical storm Rafael by this weekend, but I think a cold front heading in our direction Friday will keep it just to our east. So let's see what our exclusive Fox model futurecast shows. There is Rafael rolling over western Cuba tomorrow, pushing into the Gulf, and this model actually has it making landfall just to the south of Baton Rouge, close to New Orleans by Saturday morning. But notice it does stay off to the east of Houston as that cold front rolls in. So for the next 3 days, I don't think we'll have any tropical trouble. We will, however, have an isolated shot for rain Wednesday. Better rain chances, though, as we get towards the end of the work week on Friday. As that next front moves in, we will heat up a little bit ahead of that front, but drying out at least somewhat by early next week. At least a low chance for an isolated shower, down to 20% for Monday and Tuesday, and those temperatures staying near 80 to 83 degrees for early next week.
Ramisha, thank you. Well, coming up, we are going over the U.S. Senate races across the country. Anchor Lena DeFlorias will be breaking down the balance of power and show us the seats up for grabs.
And control of the U.S. Senate is still up for grabs here tonight.
Let's go ahead and check in back with anchor Lena DeFlores, who's in the newsroom with the latest on the key races. That includes the race between U.S. Senator Ted Cruz and Congressman Colin Allred.
Yes, so Texas has not sent a Democrat to the U.S. Senate since 1988. Just wanted to get you the latest update on the presidential race. At last check here, Trump now over 200 with 204 electoral votes versus Harris's 112. Now, when it comes to the Senate, we're taking a look at this big race. This is the only Texas U.S. Senate seat that is on the ballot. So overall, it looks like Cruz is in the lead by a massive margin there. Here locally, Allred is winning in Harris and Fort Bend counties, and Cruz is ahead in Montgomery, also in Brazoria and in Galveston as well. But you're wondering how things look overall. Remember, the Senate is 100 seats and Texas gets 2 of them. How do we know that? Because every state gets 2 of them. And these are 6-year terms and they're staggered. That's why even though there's 100 seats, only 34 of them are on the ballot. Now, 100 seats means 51 is needed for control. Right now, Democrats have it, but it looks like this is leading with Republicans ahead of the game. And if you want to see where Texas is represented, remember, there are only 2 seats here, Ted Cruz and John Cornyn. And if you're wondering other states to watch, not only Texas, but also watching Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Why? Because those are the battleground states that both candidates are looking at to win the 270 to get to the White House.
All right, Lena, thank you. And coming up, we're getting a breakdown of tonight's results and races with our What's Your Point panel and political reporter Greg Rugen. And tonight we are getting in-depth analysis on the important races this election night. Greg Rugen and the What's Your Point panel joining us now with some more insight. Greg.
Yeah, a stunning, unforeseen phenomenon underway here in Harris County with Republicans challenging in multiple races. Bill King, what's going on here?
Well, this is quite a shocker. The polling showed these races would not be close at all. But, you know, we got a little bit of a hint when we saw the early voting numbers, and the Republicans and Democrats were pretty close on that, but there was this huge group of people that had no primary history and a bunch of brand new voters. And so the question was, who were those people? And I'm beginning to think that this is a lot of people that probably haven't typically voted, but were listening to that crime message that got out there so much and has been repeated in multiple elections now. Look, the key is going to be who came to vote today. That's going to decide these races.
Holly Hansen, you're not surprised.
I'm not. You know, I've been listening to people, and especially people who are moderate Democrats or independent voters, and this community is tired of the crime. And so that message has really resonated with them, and I think you see that reflected in the numbers we're seeing right now. If these numbers hold, we're looking at a huge Republican turnout or a shift towards Republicans in Harris County, which was very unexpected by a lot of people, but some saw it coming.
Charles Blaine, this is supposed to be a county that is dominated by Democrats. Not in these numbers.
Right, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, we're the third largest county in the country. People look at us and lump us in with these other counties that are deeply blue. But I think what this goes to show, if whether win or lose, where we are now, if these numbers stay within a range that they are in, it shows that Republicans can remain competitive in large urban areas, particularly in Harris County. And if they lose, it just gives them more energy to come into the next cycle with actual funding, because a lot of these races, there was no funding behind them, and they're still 1 point within striking distance.
Paul Castro, these have to be gratifying numbers for you. You've been out there beating the drum for better public safety, having gone through personal tragedy.
Yeah, so the Republican PAC that was out there supporting Republican judges invested their money wisely. A lot of families attached their names and their beloved deceased family members' names to this effort. And my hope is that people remember them once people get into office, have the power to do something about this and change the direction of our county.
All right, we're going to leave it there. We're going to watch these races closely and see if change comes to Harris County. Anthony, back to you.
All right, Greg, thank you. And before we go, let's go ahead and take a look at House District 14, which stretches from Freeport to Orange, Texas, including Beaumont. Now, right now, we're taking a look at incumbent Randy Weber, who is leading the way. He's the Republican candidate there at 193,238 votes. Now, Rhonda Hart, it's very interesting because she has been a gun safety advocate. She actually lost her 14-year-old daughter in the 2018 Santa Fe shooting. She is trailing behind at 85,472 votes, with 69% of the votes cast so far. Let's look over at Galveston County Sheriff, where it looks like Republican Jimmy Fullen is leading the way at 85,100 votes. Democrat Mark Salinas is behind with 51,814 votes. We'll be right back.
The Fox 26 weather app with more features in one easy-to-use screen. Current weather at a glance, high-resolution interactive radar, severe weather alerts, video forecasts, and much more. It's the power of your Gulf Coast Weather Authority in the palm of your hand. The Fox 26 weather app. Download it today.
All right, let's take a look at the race for Harris County District Attorney. And wow, this is very close. Democrat Sean Tier, who beat current District Attorney Kim Ogg in the primaries, is leading the way. But very close is Republican Dan Simons. We'll be keeping a very close eye on this race as well.
And every seat in the U.S. House is up for grabs tonight. The Republicans held a slim majority heading into tonight's election.
Anchor Lena DeFlorias has the latest in the balance of power from the newsroom. Lena.
Also, with a look at the Electoral College for the presidency. So again, 29 races have been called. We have Trump in the lead with 210 electoral votes versus Harris's 113. I also want to point out of the states that have been called, not all of these have been called. They're just trending, some of them. But of all the races that have been called, so far, none of them have changed from 2020. So everything that you're seeing on the board to this point is expected. Now, in the House, you mentioned that there are several races that have been called. In District 2, we have Crenshaw winning. In District 7, Fletcher has been called, and District 18, Sylvester Turner has been called. But the House, with the unexpected or unexpired term rather of the 18th Congressional District, we still don't know who is winning this race. Is it Erica Lee Carter, Maria Dunn, or Kevin Durrell? So this is still in play here. But I want to walk through the House of Representatives. This is a much larger chamber than the Senate. This is 435 seats. They each represent a congressional district, and in Texas, there are 38 of them. Now, this is based on population, and they're 2-year terms. So that's why we end up with all 435 seats up for election, each presidential term and each midterm election as well. Now, right now in the House, this is the chamber that Republicans control, and it looks like they're going to be in control again, possibly, if this follows the current trend. Of that 435 seats, it's 218 for majority. Right now, Republicans have that, but just barely by 2 seats. But, I mean, once you get that 218, that's where you win it. So I also want to take a look at how it looks physically for the state of Texas. Texas representation here in the House looks something like this. It's basically 2 Republicans per Democrat that has been sent to the House from the state of Texas. So there are a total of 38, 25 of them are Republicans, and the rest are Democrats. But again, remains to be seen because not all of the races have been called. If we go back to the map here where we're looking at the Electoral College, let's see, here we go. There we go. Also, this is where this plays in. We have 40 electoral votes because remember, the total there is your representatives, which in Texas is 38, plus the 2 senators that every state gets. That's how Texas ended up with 30 or 40 electoral votes. And we're one of the big 4 as well. The big 4 here would be Texas, California, New York, and Florida. Back to you.
All right, really good explainer there, Lena. Thank you so much. Well, the 4 NASA astronauts living in the International Space Station did not have to let their current location stand in the way of them doing their civic duty. They requested absentee ballots ahead of the election. Astronaut Butch Wilmore said he voted early during a talk with students at Tennessee Tech University, which is his alma mater. NASA makes it easy to vote even from space. Astronauts fill out their ballots, which are then loaded into the space station's computers, and the encrypted ballots are routed via satellite to ground stations in New Mexico and then transmitted to Mission Control at the Johnson Space Center here in Houston. The NASA Center then electronically submits the ballots to appropriate county clerks' offices in Texas for filing.
Well, other news that we're following for you, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dismissed his defense minister, Yoav Gallant.
Fox News correspondent Caroline Shavli reports that Netanyahu and Gallant have repeatedly been at odds throughout the war in Gaza, but Netanyahu had avoided firing his rival until now.
In a surprise move, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has fired his popular defense minister 13 months into the country's brutal war with Hamas.
In the first months of the war, there was trust and there was very fruitful work. During the last months, this trust cracked between me and the defense minister.
Just hours before the shakeup, Minister Yoav Gallant was in northern Israel recruiting new soldiers. On Monday, Gallant approved drafting 7,000 more ultra-Orthodox men for the Israeli Defense Force.
We will have to recruit more populations, led by ultra-Orthodox populations on a large scale.
Meanwhile, the war is spilling into other areas of the Middle East. Israel said it struck a Hezbollah weapons storage facility in Syria on Tuesday and has been attacking Lebanon for weeks. Iran is now threatening to retaliate after Israeli forces carried out strikes on military targets there last month. The U.S. is deploying bombers, aircraft, and Navy destroyers to the region and sending a warning to Iran.
We stand ready to support the defense of Israel and would encourage Iran not to launch any type of retaliatory attack.
The families of Israelis still held hostage in Gaza released a statement Tuesday saying they have deep concern over the move and are calling on new Defense Minister Israel Katz to prioritize the release of hostages. In Washington, Caroline Shively, Fox News.
From Fox 26, the News Edge at 10 starts now.
Good evening to you. I am Rashi Vats, and thank you so much for joining us on this special edition of The News Edge. Really just such a historic election night, and battleground states taking the center stage in the race for president.
All right, let's get right to those numbers here. The latest national electoral count in the race for the White House between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Again, this is the Electoral College count right now, 210 in favor of former President Donald Trump compared to 113 for VP Harris. The magic number is 270, and this is with 44% of the votes counted so far. Again, that's the Electoral College count.
All right, and also the race for U.S. Senate. We're talking about the one with Ted Cruz and also Colin Allred. Now, it looks like Republican incumbent Ted Cruz is leading the way with 5,005,282 votes. Colin Allred trailing behind with 4,109,736 votes. Ted Cruz at 5,500,282 votes, and 73% of those votes have been counted so far. Now, another closely watched race is obviously the one that we're talking about here, and we have Cruz in both areas. We have Houston and also in Dallas. So let's go ahead and go to Sherman DeSalle, who is at the Ted Cruz watch party. Sherman, what's the vibe like there right now?
Yeah, good evening. So a lot of people have cleared out while still monitoring the presidential race and other key races across the country. A lot of them have cleared out, and following what Senator Ted Cruz said, he's claiming a victory at this point. When it was about 9:15 when he got up on the podium, he said that he was up 8 points. He said, quote, "It looks very likely we'll have a Republican Senate next year." At that point, he hoped that former President Donald Trump was reelected tonight. He also thanked his family. He thanked a lot of his supporters, including Alexis Nunnery, remember the mother of Jocelyn Nunnery, the teen girl who was murdered brutally by two migrants. And that's a story that was in political ads and political topics for quite a bit when it came to immigration and crime. He also thanked the Democrats in Texas who flipped to red, and he also thanked the Harris County PA, Kim Ogg, for her support. And then he thanked his opponent, Democratic opponent, Colin Allred. Take a listen.
I want to congratulate Colin Allred on a hard-fought campaign. And I want to say to all of those who didn't support me, you have my word that I will fight for you, for your jobs, for your safety, and for your constitutional rights.
Okay, so he also said he thanked Chuck Schumer, the lawmaker Chuck Schumer, for money that was donated to the Democratic race. He said he thanked his campaign, and he said that it was a waste of money. He also thought that Latino voters made a big difference in his campaign. But again, still too close to call according to the numbers that we're looking at. Despite that, they're claiming a victory here. Back to you guys in the studio.
All right, Sherman, thank you for that report. And as we follow the Senate race, let's go to Dallas.
Yeah, Fox 26's Tom Ziska is on the ground. He's covering the Allred campaign. He's joining us now with some more details. Tom.
between the two candidates.
Anthony Rochier, a much more muted presence here at the Allred campaign watch party. There was a significant groan from the crowd here when a different network called this race for Senator Cruz versus Colin Allred. That said, former gubernatorial candidate Wendy Davis took the stage a little while ago to kind of allay some of the concerns, perhaps, of people who are here who are furiously updating their phones to see what election results are, suggesting, rightly so, that some of the more populated counties in Texas have not counted all their votes, that there are more votes to be had potentially. Whether it's enough to bridge the gap that we're seeing in the results so far remains to be seen. Also, we were told some time ago that Congressman Allred would make comments here sometime in the near future, was the point that was made then. We've not had any update. We are waiting to hear from Colin Allred at any moment. When we do, we'll bring that to you, though, as they determine whether or not his campaign, this 18-month campaign to become the junior senator from the state of Texas, resonated with voters enough or not. Rashi and Anthony, back to you.
All right, Tom, thanks. You know, anchor Caroline Collins has been covering this election on social media for us all day long.
And here's what you can find on our platforms, including a breakdown of the Electoral College.
The race to 270 Electoral College votes is on right now. I'm Caroline Collins, news anchor in Houston, Texas, and we are following these battleground swing states tonight. So how do these Electoral College votes work, and why is the magic number 270? Well, let me tell you how this works. There are 538 Electoral College votes, and the majority is 270. So the candidate that gets to 270 wins the presidency. It's not off the popular vote. It really does come down to these Electoral College votes. Pennsylvania has 19 Electoral College votes up for grabs. That is the most out of these battleground states, followed by North Carolina at 16, Georgia at 16, Michigan at 15, Arizona with 11, Nevada with 6, and Wisconsin with 10 up for grabs. Those are the ones that we're keeping a close eye on. Well, if you're wondering, Texas actually has 40. That is 2 more than the last election in 2020. And the state with the most Electoral College votes is actually California. California and Texas are not key battleground states, though. Battleground or swing state means we don't know which way the vote is going to go. We'll find out soon, though. Remember to download Fox Local on your phone or your smart TV. It is free, and it is a great way that you can stay up to date minute by minute on what's happening in this election with both the presidential election and all of our state and local races here in Texas.
All right, and here is a live look at Washington, D.C. at the Capitol tonight. Everything looks pretty calm. We're getting those numbers in. And in fact, let's go ahead and look at some of those numbers that we're getting in the race for president.
And again, these are the Electoral College numbers that we are looking at right now. Former President Donald Trump in the lead with 214 Electoral College votes. That includes Texas here. He won Texas earlier today with the 40 Electoral College votes from Texas. And then you have Vice President Kamala Harris sitting at 179 Electoral College votes. That's about 45% of the votes counted here so far. Again, the number that we need to get to that Caroline just mentioned, 270.
All right, now let's take a look at the Texas electoral votes. Well, these votes right here, actually Donald Trump, Republican, looking at more than 5,311,700 votes, and it looks like Democrat Kamala Harris, Vice President, trailing behind at 4,001,623 votes, and 74% of those votes have been cast so far. Well, our election coverage continues right after the break. But first, let's go ahead and check in with meteorologist Ramisha Shade in the Weather Center.
Well, our election morning started off with heavy rain and strong storms associated with a cold front. Tonight, we've gotten rid of the rain and we are feeling that cooler fall-like air. I'll let you know how chilly it will get for tonight and tomorrow morning and when our next front will arrive. I'll also have a look at Hurricane Rafael in the Caribbean coming up.
Harris County has a new election headquarters.
And Fox 26's Abigail Dye is joining us from there live. We understand that was just another press conference held by the Harris County clerk. Abigail.
There was just moments ago, Anthony, and they're continuing to count those votes up. This is one of the 6 rally centers here in Harris County where the physical voting machines and the physical voting objects, they come here to be analyzed, and those votes are counted right here in-house. And we do know at this point, 12 of the 700 voting centers are reporting. So that kind of gives you an idea about just how long this process could take. You know, those polls closed at 7, and now we're sitting here at about 10 p.m., and we only have 12 out of the 700 who are officially reporting. So this is a long process. Harris County is a huge county, and this is a huge election. We also know that 319,000 people showed up in the county to vote in person today, and that is probably the number that we're going to stick with from now on, because we're told that there are no more voters in line. There are no more, votes being cast at this point. All the votes are in, and at this point, it is just a counting game. Now, that 319,000, that's over 100,000 more voters who showed up on Election Day than last year. So a lot of in-person voter mobilization here in the county. And of course, 1.23 million voters decided to vote early. Now, we'll show you a little bit of what's going on right now, counting those votes in the election headquarters. This is what all of these workers will be doing for the rest of the night. It's a big task that is overseen by monitors and a lot of different policy to make sure that this is done correctly and as quickly as possible. But the most important thing is getting it right.
It takes several different hundreds of folks at each site to start going through all of our folders, boxes, materials, and information. And so we just ask for you to exercise patience. I said earlier that accuracy over rushing something is most important to me. We're going to be efficient and make sure that everything is done with integrity.
Like the clerk said, integrity, that is their #1 point here. They're not going to rush anything. And like I said, there are in-person monitors who are here, some personnel from the DOJ, members from the GOP, and members from the Democratic Party, all here monitoring this vote counting. So it's a big operation. It's a big process. I'll be back and just later in the show to give you an update on how all of this counting is going. Back to you in studio for now.
All right, Abigail, thank you. Well, the balance of power in Congress is on the line tonight.
Let's go back over to anchor Lena DeFlorius in the newsroom right now with a live update on the current projections here. Lena.
All right, so let's take a look. I just wanted to show you the electoral map here because the AP has just called California for Trump and California for Harris and Idaho for Trump. But overall, the total electoral count here is 214 for Trump and 179 for Harris. Of all of the races that have been called, no surprises. You're looking at a carbon copy of 2020. The surprises are going to come in when the swing states start reporting. When we take a look at the balance of power in Congress, remember, Congress is just as important, if not more important than the White House at some points. So in the Senate, the upper chamber, you have 100 seats. 2 of them are here in Texas. And we know that because every state gets 2. It doesn't matter the size of the state, the population of the state, and they're 6-year terms, and they're staggered. So every election, you'll see about 1/3 of the seats on the ballot. This year, there are 34 of them. Here's what it looks like. There are 100 seats, which means 51 is needed for control. Republicans are looking to pick up 1 or 2 seats to either take balance or control of the upper chamber. Right now, they're leading with 48 seats. Now, in the House of Representatives, the lower chamber, much, much larger. 435 seats, and 38 of them are in Texas. This is the first time Texas has had 38 representatives, and it's a result of the 2020 census. So most of your representation is based on population. These ones are 2-year terms, and every single election, whether it's presidential or midterm, you'll see all 435 of those seats up for election. Because there's 435, 218 is what's needed for control. And again, looks like, Republicans are in the lead here, and Republicans currently control this chamber. And again, if you're wondering what Texas's representation looks like, it would be here. There are 38 seats for Texans, and there are basically 2-to-1 Republican to Democrat. You have 25 Republican seats, and then about half that for Democrats. But again, that could all change tonight because all of these seats are on the table. Guys, back to you.
Alina, thanks. Well, another big item on the ballot, the $4.4 billion bond for the Houston Independent School District.
Yes, and actually, if approved, it could be the biggest school bond in Texas history. We have Isaiah Carey watching those results. He's standing by with the latest. Hi there, Isaiah.
Hey there, guys. It is a resounding message to members of the HISD appointed school board, Mike Miles, the superintendent, and the TEA. People saying no. Now, checking on the top issue, let's take a look at it right now. Proposition 8, the $4 billion schoolhouse bond for Houston HISD, which would prevent or build new schools and repair old ones, get the mold out. And of course, Proposition B, which would pay the taxes on the bond, school technology bond for HISD. Let's check in with Fox 26's Jonathan Mejia live at the Hattie Mae Educational Support Center, where they have to be talking in Northwest Houston tonight. Jonathan?
Hey, Isaiah, when we talk about $4.4 billion, that is going to drive many people to the polls. And I was out there all evening talking to some who were for it, others were against it, and this is what they had to say.
No trust, no bond. So the reason we're saying that is because this administration has been lying to us. You know, everything has been bait and switch. They've been manipulating parents, teachers since the takeover began. So we don't trust them with $4.4 billion.
There is no trust there. Look at what he's done just this year since he's been here, right? We've lost half of our principals, 40% of our teachers. 10,000 students have left the district.
It's a worthy thing. I mean, it's worth it. I mean, you know, I'll pay a couple of extra dollars in taxes to, I guess, upgrade our school system and our technology. I voted yes on both of them.
And it's the first time I've ever gone against a bond, but this is not for the children. It is for Mike Miles and his kangaroo court, and it's really sad, and that's why I'm out here, because the world is run by those who show up. No trust, no bond.
Fox 26 reached out to HISD Superintendent Mike Miles for an interview, but he was not available. I'm reporting live outside the HISD headquarters. Jonathan Mejia, Fox 26 News.
All right, thanks a lot, Jonathan. Now let's check in on some other school propositions around the greater Houston area, starting with Alief ISD tax rate hike, and there are the results there. 50.2% against, while 49.8% for. That is the latest in that tax race. Montgomery County ISD tax rate hike. Here are the numbers for that. For 51%, against 49%. Magnolia ISD tax rate hike, and it's 60% against and 40% for. Spring ISD tax rate, and it's against there as well, 64%, while for 36%. And so, Rashi, it looks like the only success that we've seen tonight is in Montgomery County. And of course, we'll continue to watch these numbers all night.
All right, Isaiah, thank you for that update there. And coming up next, we will have a check of your forecast with meteorologist Ramisha Shade, now taking a look at some numbers that are coming in. Sugarland residents who are voting on a $350 million bond proposal that includes a new police headquarters, animal shelter, street sidewalk improvements. So we're looking at Prop A. 64% are for it, 36% against it. This would be a $144.5 million proposition.
And again, I believe we have Prop B. Now, still, we are talking about that $350 million, and this is how it's going to be split up between the different propositions. Proposition B, this one is $118 million of that $350. It'll go towards streets, sidewalks, and other mobility, and also to reconstruct or replace the pavement in some of those residential areas there on the roads. We'll be right back with another look at your You Decide 2024 Election Day results. right, before the break, we told you about Proposition A and B there in Sugarland. Remember, this is a $350 million bond. Now, Proposition C, this portion of it, would provide $30 million for drainage projects throughout the city. And right now, 73% of folks are in favor of Proposition C passing there as of right now in Sugarland.
And now let's look at Proposition D. It's $440.5 million dollars used for 2 municipal projects, including a field maintenance facility and also rehabilitation and modernization for public service buildings. And it looks like 51.3% are for it and 48.7% are against it. Very close race there.
And to wrap this all up, Proposition E. $12 million here to help fund the construction of a new animal shelter, which was approved by voters in a 2019 bond election. As of right now, Proposition E as part of a larger $350 million bond proposal here on the ballot in the city of Sugarland. Now, Election Day started with some heavy showers. It kind of woke some of us up even here this morning, but the good news is it kind of cleared out.
Yeah, or kept some of us sleeping.
There you go.
All right, let's check in with meteorologist Ramisha Shade in the Weather Center.
Yeah, if your plans took you to the polls to vote when they opened around 7 a.m., it might have been a little dicey across the Houston area because we had a big-time cold front roll through, dumped some heavy rain, produced a few strong to severe storms. But for this election night, we are drying out across Houston and the rest of the state, and we are enjoying some cooler air behind that cold front. In fact, some of you may need the jackets in the morning. 50s and 60s likely for the late night hours. A nice taste of fall. Wind a lot lighter out there, out of the north around 5 to 10 miles per hour, and we've got partly cloudy conditions. Check out these temps. Around this time last night, many of you were still hanging on to the low 80s, but already down to the 60s for many locations, low 70s for Houston, but down to around 64 degrees up around Conroe. So that's one of the spots that may end up in the 50s in the morning. So enjoy it. Let me get you out the door in the morning. It's looking like it's going to be very quiet weather for the entire area behind that front. Like I said, cooler and drier for Houston, right around 60 degrees around 6 a.m. 63 by 8, so perfect walking and jogging weather. No rain or storms to worry about, so hopefully you can sleep a little better without all of the storminess. 69 degrees by late morning around 10 a.m. tomorrow. How about tomorrow afternoon? We start off comfortable and feeling like fall, and actually for the afternoon, it is still going to be a nice, pleasant afternoon with those temperatures only climbing to the upper 70s for Houston, 80 for Bel Air, over towards Jersey Village, right around 80 in Western Harris County. Weather where you live, 78 degrees for that high in Cypress tomorrow and up to around 79 in Katy. Rain chances are slim to none tomorrow. A very small chance for a stray shower, but I'm not expecting much. Our rain chances, though, do start to increase for Friday and Saturday. That's going to be associated with our next cold front that will likely come rolling in late Friday into Saturday. Now, I do think that will play a part in steering what is now Hurricane Rafael in the western Caribbean Sea. Definitely getting closer to the western tip of Cuba. It likely will roll right over Cuba by tomorrow morning and then push into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. So some of you may be thinking, it's November. A hurricane in the Gulf, it is super uncommon, but it's not impossible. So here we are as we go into the future with our exclusive Fox model futurecast. Friday night, this hurricane likely starts to weaken a bit back to a tropical storm as it approaches the north central Gulf Coast. Here comes our next cold front into the Houston area, and I think that will act to keep this hurricane just to the east of Houston, likely weakening to a tropical storm by this weekend, and most of the models have it likely making landfall right along the Louisiana Gulf Coast. So overall, I don't think it's going to be a big impact from any tropical system for us. However, we will still have to deal with the spotty rain showers as that next cold front moves in Friday and Saturday. Temperatures will be pleasant and fall-like tomorrow, but heating back up to the 80s for Thursday, Friday, and then a little bit more comfortable as we go into early next week. Rain chances will start to drop as well by Monday and Tuesday of next week. So overall, not bad for tomorrow. Enjoy the quiet weather, but get ready for that next front coming at the end of the work week.
Before we go, let's check in with the results for Harris County Flood Control District Proposition A. Now, this is to increase property tax to repair or replace infrastructure to lower the risk of flooding. And right now, 4 is getting 51.2% of the votes, winning out against the against, which is 48.8%.
And at 10:26 here tonight, we are making the call in the unexpired term for U.S. House District 18. The late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee's daughter, Erica Lee Carter, will now finish out her mother's term, defeating Maria Dunn in that special election. That term will end in January. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to The News Edge as we follow tonight's historic election.
And let's check back in with the top watched race here in the state between Republican incumbent Senator Ted Cruz and the Democratic challenger Representative Colin Allred. And again here, we took a press conference earlier from Senator Ted Cruz where he is now claiming victory. And over in the Allred camp, Allred is saying that there are some votes still out there and some Democratic strongholds, but the Cruz camp saying it's insurmountable, already claiming victory. But you can see the raw numbers there on your screen with 76% of the votes already counted here. We have Cruz in both of those camps. We'll check back with them as well. Now, we do know Representative Colin Allred is expected to make a public statement here at some point tonight. We don't know when that's coming down. It could be a concession, but we'll definitely pay close attention to that. And again, we heard from Senator Ted Cruz earlier tonight.
We must defend our God-given rights. Not some of them, not most of them, but all of them. the right to speak truth in an age of enforced lies, the right to worship the Lord God Almighty with all of our heart, mind, and soul without government getting in the way, and the right to protect our families without asking bureaucrats for permission.
And as we take a look at the race for the White House, this is the National Electoral College count, currently sitting at 230 Electoral College votes for former President Donald Trump and 187 for VP Harris, with about 52, a little more than half of the votes counted as of right now. Again, the number we are all watching closely here is 270.
All right, let's look at some of those watch parties here. We are taking a live look at the Harris headquarters over at Howard University, where they are anxiously awaiting the votes to come in and to see if Kamala Harris will be winning the presidential election.
And here is a live look at the Trump headquarters in Palm Beach, Florida here. Right now, must be feeling good ahead at 230 Electoral College votes. But again, the battleground states are usually the states that decide elections, and we still have more to count.
Our What's Your Point panel has been providing insight on this election.
Anchor Isaiah Carey joins political reporter Greg Grugan and political analyst Mark Jones with some more conversation here tonight, guys.
And it has been a fascinating night watching this election 2024. And of course, Mark Jones from Rice University is here with Greg Grugan and I. And of course, Greg, take it over.
Mark, my big question, Colin Allred made a bid to become the first Democrat to win statewide in 30 years. Why did he fall short?
Well, he was an excellent candidate. He raised a lot of money. He ran a solid campaign, but he had one fatal flaw. He had a D next to his name at a time when the Biden administration is very unpopular. Majority of Texas voters do not like what the Biden administration has done with the economy. They're upset about immigration and border security. They're upset about crime. And having that D next to his name was effectively a killer for Allred. There was no way for him to essentially overcome it.
We are seeing a phenomenon here in Harris County where Republicans are challenging up and down the ballot after spending very little money, and yet we may wake up tomorrow with Republicans winning. What is going on, Mark?
Well, that's the real shocker. The Democratic support in Harris County has plummeted. Republicans had higher than average turnout. Democrats lower than average turnout. Right now, there are many Democratic judges and candidates for DA and tax assessor collector that are hanging by a thread. If the election day vote just leans slightly Republican, we could have something close to a sweep of judgeships by Republicans, and we could see even the Democratic DA candidate lose. I think the only Democrat who can go to sleep tonight knowing that he's going to be reelected is Ed Gonzalez, the sheriff. The lack of success in Harris County is also likely to cost Democrats the 1st and 14th Court of Appeals justice positions. There are 10 of them. Democrats depend on a large margin in Harris County to compensate for lack of support in the suburbs. All 10 of those are likely to go to the Republican candidates.
And Mark, we have seen a lot of the bond proposals, especially at HISD, rejected by the voters. What do you see the reasoning behind that?
Well, for HISD, what's clear there is that the people who normally support those type of propositions do not like the current superintendent. They didn't get out to vote in favor of it. In fact, they campaigned against it. And you combine that with the natural opposition of many Republicans to the de facto tax increase that those propositions would have occasioned, and you get the overwhelming rejection.
How much of the contention by Republicans here locally can be traced back to the public safety issue?
Well, crime is clearly a top issue for Harris County voters, and there was a very well-run campaign that focused on the judicial races and told voters, you can vote for Kamala Harris, you can vote for Colin Allred, but please vote for the Republican judges so that we remove the Democratic judges who many Republicans believe are too soft on crime.
All right. Well, we want to thank you, Mark Jones from Rice University. Greg, for you and I, and Anthony, back to you.
All right, guys, good conversation. And now one of the 2 seats that represents the Lone Star State was on the ballot here tonight.
That's right. And anchor Lena DeFloria is joining us again from the newsroom on why only one of the Senate seats was on the ballot. Lena.
Yeah. some people might have been looking for John Cornyn. Why haven't I seen ads for Cornyn? Why isn't Cornyn on my ballot? That's because he won his seat in 22, which means it's not going to be up for 6 years. So when we're looking at the Senate race here, it's already been called for Ted Cruz. Here locally is where we like to focus. So there's no big surprise there that we saw Harris County and Fort Bend County traditionally going blue, and that's what they did this time around. Brazoria, Galveston, Montgomery went with the rest of the state, the majority of the state, and voting Republican. But remember, while we do have those 2 seats, only one of them was on the ballot, and it's already been decided. So there are 10 races that are still up in the air. Now, Democrats have 49 seats that have already been called. It only takes 51 for control. So if they get one more seat, they will have an even split, and then it would be decided by the Vice President of the United States, because the Vice President is the tiebreaker in the Senate. Also, if they get 2 seats, then they are in total control there. Taking a look at the Electoral College, too, in case you're just wondering why, and the latest numbers here. Trump is at 230, Harris is at 192, 270 is the magic number. But the one thing that you are not seeing is final returns coming in from the battleground states here. We still don't have results, but the majority of them are trending to Republicans, and that would be a repeat of 2016. That includes Arizona, Nevada, the only swing state that's not yet reporting.
All right, Lena, thank you so much. Really in-depth breakdowns. Really appreciate those, Lena. But now we want to get back to the U.S. House District 18 race.
That's right. Fox 26's Don Lake Heath is live at the Sylvester Turner and Erica Lee Carter watch party. Both winners tonight. Domely.
Yeah, and both have already given their victory speeches, so it's much quieter in here now. Just a few moments ago, there was nothing but applause and lots of people celebrating because there are 2 winners here in the 18th Congressional District. The late Sheila Jackson Lee, her daughter Erica Lee Carter, has been elected to finish out her mother's unexpired term until January, and Erica Lee Carter received 115,742 votes. Her competitor Maria Dunn received 35,726 votes. Now, also Sylvester Turner, former Houston mayor, he's been elected to sit in this seat beginning in January for a 2-year term. Turner received 118,700 votes, and his competitor, Lana Santonzi, received 50,317. Now, both Turner and Lee Carter say they are ready to get to work for the people of the 18th Congressional District.
Being diagnosed with cancer should not be a death sentence. But if you don't have access to quality health care, like my dad, it can be. My dad died early. The Speaker of the House said a week or 2 ago they were thinking about eliminating the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. The hell if you will. I'm heading there to say no, no, no. Not gonna happen. If I have anything to do with it.
I just want to thank Houston for loving her, for lifting her, for supporting her these many decades, and I'm honored to finish on her behalf.
And this has been a historic seat once held by Barbara Jordan, Mickey Leland, Craig Washington, Sheila Jackson Lee, and now Erica Lee Carter and Sylvester Turner. And Fox 26's election coverage will continue right after this break.
And welcome back. A big race tonight. The election for Fort Bend County Precinct 3 Commissioner. There's already been some controversy surrounding this contest, and that's saying it lightly. Here are the candidates. You see them right there on the screen. Andy Myers and the Democrat Taro Patel. Our Randy Wallace is live in Fort Bend County with the latest. Randy?
Yeah, Isaiah. Now, this race, as you said, has made a lot of headlines due to criminal charges filed against the Democratic candidate, Taro Patel. Now, he's accused of going online, posting disturbing racist rants, and then pretending to be the victim of those rants. Now, after a criminal investigation, he ended up being charged, criminally charged, as being the one that was posting the racist posts, rants.
I'm grateful that we had so many people, even cross party lines, to come vote for me, because I had a lot of the Democrats tell me point blank to my face that we're voting for you because we simply will not tolerate what your opponent did.
Now, Myers has been the Precinct 3 Commissioner since 1997, and he will continue in that position. Isaiah, back to you.
Randy Wallace, thanks a lot. And Fort Bend voters also looking at Proposition A, and you can see the results there. Just like the trend we're seeing here in Harris County, they're voting against it. 58% against and 42% for. Also, the Fort Bend County tax assessors race. Let's take a look at those results. Yasan Joseph, 50%, while Carmen Turner has 49%. And we'll be right back.
All right, we continue to look at the numbers that continue to roll in here throughout the night.
Let's check in with Fox 26's Abigail Dye at the Harris County election headquarters.
Rashi, Anthony, I've been saying it all night. Harris County is a huge county, and there is a huge job to be done here. We're looking at some very serious races here. The race for the district attorney, the race for the Harris County sheriff, some different bond and tax issues, and every single one of those ballots is coming into a rally site like this one. This headquarters acts as a rally site. It's one of 6 here in the county where the voting equipment physically comes for those ballots to be counted. If we take a look here at these workers live counting votes right now in these headquarters, this is something that they are going to be doing for the rest of the night. We know that 1.23 million voters voted early here in Harris County, and another 319,000 showed up today on Election Day to vote in person. And so all of those votes, they have to go through a very meticulous process. And not only that, but all of this is monitored by certified monitors, different members from the GOP party, members from the Democratic Party, members from the DOJ and the SOS. So this is a very big process and a very big feat for a headquarters like this to take on. We do know that 12 of those voting centers, 12 out of 700 are reporting now, and that's hours after the polls close. So that just gives you an idea of how long this process will take. But we're going to stay here and we're going to continue to monitor how this is going, monitor those numbers, and we'll bring you an update in just a bit. Sending it back to you.
All right, Abigail, thank you. Now, another race that we're following is the Senate race, and it's been very close. Right now, we do know that Colin Allred is speaking.
Yes, let's go live to his camp there in Dallas.
To run partly because of what I saw on January 6th. What happened when people lie about a free and fair election because they weren't happy with the results. I said then, and I'll say it now, you can't just be a patriot when your side wins. So tonight, we didn't win, but we will continue to be patriots. Isn't that right? I want to thank every single Texan, every single American who got involved in this race, but especially the folks who knocked on doors, who made phone calls, who gave whatever they could to this campaign. You know, I come from a family where we didn't have a lot of money. And so I know what it means when somebody sends in $5 or $10. It's an act of hope. And I appreciate them. And I really especially want to thank all the incredibly brave Texas women who've come forward and told their stories. Amanda Zarowski, Kate Cox, Lauren Miller, Dr. Austin Denard, Taylor Edwards, I could keep going. There are so many brave Texas women who've told their stories. And Allie and I will never forget them, and we will never stop fighting to overturn this abortion ban here in Texas. I carry 3 little rocks with me that my sons picked out on the playground. They represent my 2 kids and my wife, Allie.
Colin Allred there simply saying tonight we did not win. So that means Ted Cruz, the senator, will get a third 6-year term here representing the Senate, one of 2 seats here held by Texans. Senator Cornyn being the other one.
Well, we have more coverage on the races that we're watching tonight, Harris County Attorney and also the race for Harris County District Attorney.
All right, let's send things back over to Isaiah Carey for another update.
Has been a different kind of night for Democrats here in Harris County, who should be initially ahead of the race, but we saw some different things. Democrat Sean Tier and Republican Dan Simmons, facing off here. Take a look at these numbers. Sean Tier with 50% and Dan Simmons with 49.4%. And many political analysts say it should not be that close in Harris County. On to the race for Harris County Attorney. Democrat Christian Menifee is going for a second term. He's up against Republican Jacqueline Lucy Smith. And as the analyst said, that is very close, closer than it should be for a Democrat in Harris County. Christian Menifee, 50.3%, and Jacqueline Smith, 49.7%. On to now the race for Texas Railroad Commissioner. Republican Christy Craddock is running against Democrat Catherine Colbert for a third term. And there you see at the top, we have Christy Craddock with 56% of the vote, and Democrat Catherine Colbert with 39% of the vote. So a shocking night here in Harris County for Democrats. Back to you guys.
All right, Isaiah, thank you. Well, you want to stick around for our election coverage. We are here with you every step of the way. Let's take a look at some of the races that we are looking at right now. Galveston County Sheriff Jimmy Fullen looking like he is winning by a landslide, 88,470. Democrat Mark Salinas trailing behind at 54,257. And we know that about 65% of those votes have been counted so far.
And another sheriff's race here. We have the Republican Marshall Slott up against the incumbent Democrat Eric Fagan. This one been close now throughout the night. About 2,000 votes here. It's less than 2,000 votes separating these two men. We'll continue to follow that after this quick commercial break. All right, of course, lots of you guys want to know what's happening with the U.S. presidential race between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump.
Let's head over back into the newsroom where anchor Lena DeFlores has the latest on the Electoral College map and where the numbers come from. Lena.
All right, so here we go. The latest numbers right now, Trump is in the lead with 230 and Harris is at 205. And remember, 270 is the magic number you want to see. But I want to point out that several of the swing states, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, also Arizona and Nevada. These swing states haven't been called. The only one that's been called is North Carolina. So we are still waiting for some pretty big races that could sway things. Now, I want to take a look at what happens next. We have something called Safe Harbor Day on the 8th of December. This is when the state certifications are due. This is where there are no more arguments, there are no more court cases. They have to turn them in because then the electors have to meet and vote on the 17th. And then we go into the new year. On the 3rd is when Congress swears in, and it will be Kamala Harris who swears in Congress, whether she wins tonight or not, because she's the current vice president, and the current vice president is the president of the Senate. Then we have the congressional certification. That comes up on January 6th, and Inauguration Day is then on the 20th. How long is this going to take, and when will we know? I can't tell you that, but I can take a look back and tell you last year it was 4 days. We didn't know the final results until Saturday. In 2016, you woke up the day after election, you knew who the presumptive winner was. But in 2000, it took 36 full days before we saw the final results. So results are still coming in here from several states. We still have a long way to go. You may go to bed tonight without knowing who is the presumptive winner.
All right, Lena, thank you. Well, our coverage continues tonight. And as we go to break, here are some updated numbers for you for Texas Supreme Court Place 2. We have right now the incumbent Republican right now winning, Jimmy Blaylock, at 5,436,013 votes. Deshaun Jones trailing behind at 3,792,184 votes. We'll be right back.